Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time, but we're not going to visit a palace or witness a grand battle. Instead, we're going to drop you right into the heart of the Viking Age to see if you could survive just one single day. We'll be stripping away the romantic, muscle-bound, Marvel movie version of Vikings and replacing it with the cold, damp, and oft odd and brutal reality of daily life in 9th century Scandinavia. Spoiler alert, the odds are not in your favor. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love hearing where you're all tuning in from, so let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you note isn't something you see, but something you feel. A deep, penetrating cold that seems to radiate from the very ground beneath you. You're lying on something softish, a pile of straw, or maybe animal furs, but the warmth is shallow, a tiny island in an ocean of chill. The second thing you notice is the smell. It's thick, complex, and overwhelmingly smoky. It stings your nostrils and makes your eyes water, even before you've opened them. It's the smell of a wood fire that has been burning low all night, but mixed with something else, something deeply earthly human. It's the scent of unwashed bodies, damp wool, old leather, and stale ale, all mingling in the airless space. That isn't a rustic artisanal incense, my friend. That's just people. Your eyes flutter open, but it doesn't help much. The world is a canvas of deep grays and shifting shadows. There are no windows. The only light comes from the very heart of the large, cavernous room. You're in a long, rectangular fire pit where a few stubborn embers glow like sleepy orange eyes. The smoke from this fire doesn't have a clean chimney to escape through. Instead, it drifts lazily upwards, staining the heavy roof beams a greasy black before finding a small, designated hole in the ceiling to seep out into the preyed-on sky. You are in a Viking longhouse. This is your home. And it is not just your home, and it is not just to the gloom. You begin to make out shapes. All around you, scattered on raised wooden platforms that run along the walls, are lumps and mounds of sleeping bodies. You can hear the symphony of their slumber, a deep, rumbling snore from a large shape to your left, a soft wheezing from your right, the occasional cough, the sleepy murmur. You count at least 20 other people sharing this single, vast space. An entire extended family, and maybe a few farmhands or servants, all packed in together for warmth and security. You sit up, pulling the rough, scratchy woolen blanket tighter around your shoulders. The air you breathe is heavy and tastes of soot. You can see the dark silhouettes of the massive wooden pillars that hold up the long, arching roof, like the ribs of some great, slumbering beast. Some of them have carvings, but in the dim light, you can't make out the details. Are they gods, monsters, ancestors? You can't be sure. You shift your weight, and you hear a soft shuffling noise and a low bleat. Peering into the darkness at the far end of the house, you realize some of the shapes aren't human. A few goats and perhaps a calf are huddled together in their own section, sharing the longhouse for protection from the cold and from predators. Their animal scent is another layer in the complex aroma of your morning. As you look at the sea of sleeping forms, you wonder if there's a system to this. Is there a designated spot for everyone? Historians still puzzle over the social geography of the longhouse. One prevailing theory is that the family patriarch, the chieftain, and his most valued warriors slept in the center, closest to the life-giving warmth of the fire, a place of honor. Others, of lower status, distant relatives, servants, or slaves, would be relegated to the colder, draftier ends of the building. But another school of thought suggests it might have been far less organized, a nightly scramble for the best spot, dictated more by who finished their chores first than by any rigid social hierarchy. The truth is, we don't know for certain, and the answer likely varied from one clan to the next. For now, all you know is that your spot is decidedly mid-tier, not freezing, but far from toasty. A baby begins to cry somewhere in the darkness, a thin, wailing sound that is quickly shushed by a cooing mother. It's a reminder that this isn't just a shelter, it's a cradle of life, from birth to death. You carefully swing your legs off the platform, your bare feet meeting the shocking cold of the packed earth floor. It's damp and uneven. You need to relieve yourself, and that means navigating this human obstacle course in near total darkness, and then braving the frigid air outside. You stand up, every muscle protesting the cold, and take a slow, quiet step, trying not to tread on a stray hand or kick over a clay pot. The first challenge of your Viking day has begun just getting to the door without waking a very large, very grumpy man with an axe by his side. You navigate the sleeping bodies with the practiced care of someone who knows the consequences of a misstep. A kicked shin in the dark can earn you a grudge that lasts for weeks. The floor is a minefield of discarded clothes, stray tools, and sleeping dogs that twitch and whine in their dreams. Finally, you reach the heavy wooden door, lift the thick iron latch, and slip outside. The cold hits you like a physical blow. It's a damp, raw cold that seeps into your bones instantly. The world is bathed in a pale, gray light, the sun still hiding below the horizon. Mist clings to the ground, muffling all sound and making the nearby trees look like ghostly sentinels. After a moment, you slip back inside, the relative warmth of the smoky longhouse feeling like a comforting embrace, despite the smell. Someone is awake now. A woman with her hair in a long braid is crouched by the central fire pit, carefully coaxing the embers back to life. She adds small, dry wigs, blowing gently until a fragile flame flickers and catches. As the light grows, it pushes the shadows back, revealing more of the longhouse's interior. You see shields hanging on the walls, their painted surfaces dulled by a layer of soot. Spears and axes are propped in a corner, their polished edges catching the new light. The woman hangs a large, blackened cauldron over the fire from a hook suspended from the ceiling beams. The day has officially begun. You find a wooden bowl and a spoon, carved from a piece of birch, its surface worn smooth with use. You approach the fire, and the woman wordlessly ladles a scoop of something thick and grayish-brown into your bowl. This is breakfast. There is no menu, no choice. It is a portion of yesterday's dinner, reheated and ready to serve. They call its cayuse a sort of perpetual stew. The pot is rarely ever emptied. Each day, new ingredients are added to whatever was left over a handful of barley. Some chopped root vegetables like turnips or carrots pulled from the root cellar. And if you're lucky, a few scraps of meat or fish. The flavors all meld together into a single, homogeneous taste, salty, slightly smoky, and endlessly familiar. You take your bowl and find a seat on a nearby bench. You dip your spoon in. The stew is lumpy, the barley soft and mushy, the turnip pieces surprisingly firm. There might be some stringy bits of salted cod in there, or maybe mutton. It's hard to tell. It's not delicious. It's not meant to be. It is fuel. It is what will give you the energy to face the long day of work ahead. Beside the stew pot, another woman is slicing a loaf of bread. It's a dark, dense, and heavy flatbread, likely made from rye or barley flour, as wheat is a luxury reserved for the rich. It's tough and chewy, perfect for sopping up the last of the stew in your bowl, ensuring not a single calorie goes to waste. To drink, there's a bucket of water, or for the adults, a weak, low-alcohol ale. It's often safer than the water, as the brewing process kills most harmful bacteria. As you eat, you watch the other members of the household begin to stir and collect their own meager portions. You see one of the older women go to a large wooden chest in the corner. She lifts the heavy lid and pulls out a lumpy, waxy-looking mass wrapped in cloth. It's butter, but it has a strange, sharp smell, almost like a strong cheese. This is a clever bit of Viking food tech, bog butter. To preserve it for the long winter months without salt, they would pack butter into wooden containers or wrap it in animal hide and bury it deep in a peat bog. The unique chemistry of the bog, low oxygen, low temperature, and high acidity would preserve the butter for years, even decades. Over time, it would absorb the earthy, tangy flavor of the bog, transforming into something entirely new. It's a fascinating, if slightly bizarre, solution to the problem of food storage, a little piece of ancient science at work. Historians and archaeologists, sifting through the rubbish pits of Viking settlements, often abate the true nature of the Viking diet. The evidence suggests a potential for great variety. They find fishhooks and nets, pointing to a bounty of cod, herring, and salmon. They find the bones of seabirds and domesticated animals, the shells of nuts, and the seeds of wild berries and herbs. On the coast, people would have eaten shellfish and even seaweed. This paints a picture of a rich and varied cuisine, a testament to their ability to exploit every resource their environment offered. But looking down at your monotonous bowl of gray stew, you realize that potential and reality are two very different things. That variety was likely a seasonal luxury or a privilege of the wealthy. For you, an average person facing another cold day, the diet is built on a foundation of preserved, stored, and often bland staples. The berries were picked in the summer and dried for winter. The fish was caught in great numbers and then salted or dried, until it was as hard as a piece of wood. The meat came from the autumn slaughter and was smoked or salted to last until spring. So while scholars might argue about the seasonal feasts and the chieftain's well-stocked table, your daily reality is this simple, unchanging meal. It's enough to keep you alive, but it offers none of the pleasure or comfort you might associate with food. You finish the last bite, wipe your bowl clean with the piece of tough bread, and swallow. Your stomach is full, but you don't feel satisfied. The real work is about to begin. With the tasteless fuel of your breakfast sitting heavy in your stomach, you step out of the longhouse behind the other men. The sun is now fully risen, but it's a pale, watery disk in the sky, offering little warmth. Your farmstead, your little corner of the world, is a small clearing carved out of a vast, silent forest of pine and birch. Besides your longhouse, there are a few smaller, humbler buildings scattered around a sunken pit house for weaving, a small smokehouse for preserving meat, and a rickety-looking barn for storing tools and grain. The ground is a muddy soup of trampled earth and animal dung, and the air smells of pine needles and damp soil. This is where the day splits. The women and some of the younger children turn towards the pit house or stay near the longhouse. Their day will be one of 1,000 domestic tasks, a relentless cycle of work that keeps the household running. They will spin wool into yarn and weave that yarn into the very fabric you're wearing. They will grind the barley for the bread and the ale, tend the small vegetable garden, milk the goats, make cheese and butter, and care for the infants. Intricate and essential labor, and it happens almost entirely within shouting distance of the main fire. Your path leads elsewhere. You and the other men and older boys head towards the fields in the forest's edge. Your work is outside, exposed to the elements. There is no single job title here. Unless you are the chieftain or a highly skilled artisan in a large settlement, you are a jack of all trades, a master of survival. Your tasks are dictated by the season and by what is broken. In the spring, it's plowing the rocky soil with a simple ard, a scratch plow that barely breaks the surface. It's haymaking, a frantic race to gather and dry enough fodder to see the animals through the winter. In the autumn, it's the harvest and the grim, necessary task of slaughtering the excess livestock. But today, in the lingering chill of early spring, the tasks are about maintenance. The fence that keeps the precious few cattle from wandering into the forest has been damaged by the winter's heavy snow. A section of it needs to be replaced. That means felling a young tree, splitting the logs, and digging post holes in the half-frozen ground. It's brutal, repetitive work. You take turns with the heavy, long-handled axe, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump echoing in the cold air. Your hands, already calloused, still feel the jarring shock of each blow. Your back quickly begins to ache with a familiar, dull pain. There is no conversation, only the grunt of effort and the sound of your own breathing, which plumes in front of your face in white clouds. After an hour, your hands are numb with cold and your shoulders burn. You are given a different task. An oil lamp carved from soapstone was dropped yesterday into pieces broken off. Soapstone, or steated, is a wonderfully useful material for the Vikings. It's a soft, metamorphic rock, easy to carve even with simple tools, yet remarkably resistant to heat. They carve it into cooking pots, bowls, lamps, and even the spindle whorls and loom weights the women use for weaving. These items are so valuable that they are often repaired rather than replaced, and sometimes passed down through generations. Use it on a cold stump, the broken lamp in one hand and a small iron knife in the other. Your job is to carefully carve a new groove and drill a small hole so the broken piece can be reattached with a bit of iron wire. It's delicate work that requires a steady hand. Your fingers, stiff with cold, feel clumsy and thick. You work slowly, scraping away small slivers of the soft, gray, slightly greasy feeling stone. This is a quiet moment, a reprieve from the back-breaking labor of the fence, but it brings its own kind of tension. If you mess this up, you'll have wasted a valuable resource and earned the disapproval of the longhouse matriarch. Are you a farmer, a lumberjack, or a craftsman? The truth is, you're all three. It's a question historians still debate. Just how specialized was Viking society in bustling trade centers like Birka or Hidibai? You would certainly find full-time blacksmiths, shipbuilders, and jewelers, but out here, in a rural farmstead like yours, the lines were blurred. Survival demanded versatility. A man who could mend a pot, shoe a horse, and wield an axe in a fight was far more valuable than a man who could only do one of those things. Most people were generalists, their skills honed by necessity, not by formal training. From your stump, you can hear the rhythmic clack, 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 clack of the warp-weighted loom coming from the pit house. It's a sound as constant and familiar as the women inside, their fingers deftly on the hundreds of threads, their feet shuffling on the dirt floor. Their work is just as demanding as yours, just as crucial for the survival of this small community. The sun has crawled a little higher in the sky, but its light seems to have no strength. The day is still young, and the list of tasks is long. You finish your repair on the lamp, the iron wire holding the piece securely in place. It's not pretty, but it's functional. And in this world, functional is all that matters. You stand up, your joints cracking in protest, then look back towards the half-mended fence. There is no rest. There is only the next task. As you work, a dull, persistent itch starts to develop on your scalp. You try to ignore it, focusing on sharpening the point of a fence post with your axe. But the itch grows, a crawling sensation that spreads down your neck and across your shoulders. You pause, setting the axe down, and run a hand through your greasy, unwashed hair. Your fingers come away with a tiny, unwelcome speck, a louse, and where there is one, there are many. You feel a wave of resignation. It's just a part of life. Let's talk about hygiene, or rather, the general lack of it. That romantic image of a Viking warrior, fresh from a dip in a crystal-clear fjord, shaking water from his glorious blonde hair, it's mostly fantasy. The reality is much smellier. You haven't had what you would consider a proper bath in months. Through the long frozen winter, bathing was impractical and dangerous. Any full body wash would have happened in a wooden tub inside the longhouse. A laborious process of hauling and heating water, and a luxury not often afforded. Your primary method of getting clean is a quick splash of icy water on your face and hands in the morning from a bucket outside. For the rest of your body, you rely on the friction of your rough woolen clothes and the hope that you don't smell any worse than the person standing next to you. The AU or oxhorn comb you carry in a leather pouch on your belt is your most important grooming tool. It's not just for vanity. You use it several times a day to comb through your hair and beard, not just to detangle them, but to scrape out the ever-present lice in their eggs. Archaeologists find these combs everywhere in Viking graves, often beautifully carved, a sign of how essential they were to daily life. The air around you is a rich tapestry of odors. The smoky perfume of the longhouse clings to your clothes. The scent of sweat is a constant companion, rising from your own body as you exert yourself. Then there's the general aroma of the farmstead itself, animal manure, damp earth, and the faint, fishy smell of the stew still on your breath. You are so accustomed to the symphony of smells that you barely notice it. But for a modern person dropped into this era, the olfactory assault would be overwhelming. Interestingly, while their daily hygiene might seem appalling to us, some contemporary accounts suggest that Vikings were considered surprisingly clean by the standards of other cultures they encountered. An English writer in the 13th century, John of Wallingford, complained that the Danish Vikings were a menace because they combed their hair daily, bathed every Saturday, and changed their clothes frequently, which made them far too popular with English noble women. This is one of those charming historical contradictions. Were they dirty or clean? The answer is it's relative. Compared to a 21st century person with hot showers and deodorant, they were incredibly grimy. But compared to an Anglo-Saxon peasant who might have bathed even less, a Viking who took a weekly bath, de laugarda gur in Old Norse, which literally means washing day, and is the origin of the modern Scandinavian words for Saturday, might have seemed positively obsessive about his appearance. One of the most curious and debated hygienic tools found in the Viking archaeological record is a small, often ornate metal object that looks like a tiny spoon on a stick. For years, historians and archaeologists were stumped. What was it? For modern analysis suggests a very personal use in ear spoon. It was a tool specifically designed for scooping wax out of your ears. This little detail paints a vivid picture of a people who, despite living in what we would consider filth, were still concerned with the small details of personal grooming. They might not have had soap, but they had their combs, tweezers, and even their ear spoons. You sigh, giving your head another vigorous scratch. The lice are a nuisance, but they're low on your list of concerns. A much bigger problem is the health of your teeth. You run your tongue over them. They feel gritty. One of your back molars has a persistent, low-grade ache, a dull throb that sometimes sharpens when you chew on something hard. There are no dentists here, no fluoride, no soft bristle brushes. Your dental care consists of chewing on a twig to scrub away food debris and hoping for the best. The Viking diet, coarse and full of grit from stone-ground flour, was incredibly abrasive. Skeletons from the period show teeth that are worn down flat, sometimes to the pulp. Abscesses, infections, and tooth loss were incredibly common and could be life-threatening. A severe dental infection could easily spread to the bloodstream, leading to a slow, painful death. This reality is often overlooked in the heroic sagas, but it was a constant, nagging source of pain and danger for ordinary people. Historians examining Viking skulls are still trying to determine the full extent of their dental woes and whether certain regional diets led to better or worse oral health. Some findings suggest that coastal Vikings with a diet rich in fish may have had slightly better teeth than their inland, grain-eating counterparts, but the evidence is not yet conclusive. For now, you just have to live with the itch in your hair and the ache in your jaw. They are part of the physical background noise of your existence, a constant reminder of the fragility of your body in a world with no easy remedies. You pick up your axe again. The fence won't build itself, and standing still only makes you colder. The work, as hard as it is a welcome distraction from the small, persistent discomforts that define your daily life. The watery sun reaches its apex in the sky, a milestone that signals midday. Your stomach rumbles, not with true hunger, but with the ingrained expectation of a break. Someone from the longhouse brings out a small meal, more of the dark, heavy bread, a chunk of hard, salty cheese, and a wooden pail of ale. Use it on a log, shoulders slumped with fatigue, and eat in silence. It's another functional meal, consumed quickly before the cold can fully set in again. The most valuable part of this break isn't the food, it's the brief chance to stop moving. But even as you rest, the chill wind finds its way through the gaps in your clothing, a constant, unwelcome guest. Let's talk about what you're wearing. It's not the leather and studs biker gear you see in television shows. Your wardrobe is a product of necessity, made from the materials available right here on your farmstead. Your innermost layer is a long tunic of linen. It's relatively soft against your skin, but it's a precious garment. Growing flax for linen is a labor-intensive process, and every thread represents hours of work. Over the linen, you wear a thicker, heavier tunic made of wool. This is your primary defense against the cold. The wool is coarse, undyed, and relentlessly scratchy. It has a distinct, sheepy smell that intensifies when it gets damp, which is most of the time. Your trousers are also made of this same heavy wool, tied at the waist with a leather belt. They are loose-fitting, allowing for a good range of movement for work, but they do little to stop the wind from biting at your legs. On your feet, you have simple shoes made of a single piece of leather, usually cowhide, folded around your foot and stitched at the heel and toe. They are more like soft leather socks than structured shoes, and you stuff them with dry grass or moss for a bit of extra insulation and cushioning. They keep your feet from freezing, but they are far from waterproof. After a short walk through the damp fields, you can feel the cold wetness seeping through. Everything you're wearing is held together by a sturdy leather belt. This is more than just a fashion accessory, it's your utility belt. From it hangs your personal knife, your all-purpose tool for eating, carving, and self-defense, a small leather pouch for your command, maybe a fire-starting kit, and perhaps a whetstone for keeping your tools sharp. The quality of your belt buckle, often made of bronze or iron, can be a small indicator of your status. But what about that iconic Viking look? The furs and cloaks. You have a cloak, a large rectangle of heavy, shaggy wool, fastened at your right shoulder with a simple pin made of bone or bronze. This leaves your sword arm free, a practical consideration even for a farmer. The cloak is your portable shelter. You can wrap it tightly around yourself for warmth, use it as a blanket if you have to sleep outside, or even rig it as a makeshift sail on a small boat. In the biting wind, you pull it closer, the rough fibers scraping against your chin. A fascinating and slightly strange detail about Viking clothing comes from the accounts of Arab travelers who met them. Like Ahmad ibn Fadlhan, he described the Rus Vikings he encountered on the Volga River as being covered in tattoos, from their fingertips to their necks, depicting dark green, tree-like patterns and other symbols. While this account is singular and refers to a specific group of traveling merchants, not necessarily all Scandinavians, it has sparked a huge debate among historians. Was tattooing a widespread practice, or was it unique to this group of Rus? Perhaps a way of identifying themselves or expressing their beliefs, while far from home. Archaeological evidence is scarce, as skin doesn't preserve well. We have found no tattooed Viking mummies, so for now, the idea of the elaborately tattooed Viking remains a tantalizing possibility, fueled by this one incredible eyewitness account. Today, you have no fur. Furs from animals like bears, wolves, or beavers are a luxury. They are incredibly warm, a status symbol worn by chieftains, unsuccessful warriors. Your outer layer is wool, the same as everyone else's, and it's probably a dull, brownish-gray color, while the Vikings were masters of natural dyes, using plants like woad for blue, madder for red, and various lichens for yellows and greens. The dyeing process was time-consuming, and the resources precious. Brightly colored clothing was another sign of wealth. As a common farmer, your clothes are the natural, undyed color of the sheep's fleece. You blend in with the muted landscape of earth, rock, and wood. You finish your bread and cheese, washing it down with a swig of the watery ale. The break is over, You stand up, your body protesting. The cold has stiffened your muscles, and the thought of picking up the axe again fills you with a sense of weary dread. Your clothes feel heavy and restrictive. The dampness from your shoes has crept up to your ankles, and the scratchy wool tunic seems to be actively working against you, chafing your skin with every movement. This is another of the relentless, unheroic struggles of your daily life, the simple, constant battle against the elements, fought with nothing more than a few layers of damp wool and your own body heat. You turn back to the fence, pulling your cloak tighter, and prepare to face the long, cold afternoon. As the afternoon wears on, a horn blows from the direction of the chieftain's larger, more impressive longhouse, which sits on a small rise overlooking the surrounding farmsteads. The sound is long and deep, a summons that cuts through the quiet air. Your work on the fence stops immediately. The chieftain has called for a thing. This is not a request, it is a command. All free men of the area are expected to attend. You put down your tools, your heart beating a little faster. A thing can be a routine affair for settling disputes, but it can also be a venue for life-altering announcements, a new law, a call to war, or a serious criminal judgment. You join the other men from your farmstead, walking along the muddy track that leads to the designated meeting place. It's an open field, marked by a circle of large, gray standing stones that have been here for generations, long before your ancestors arrived. This is the Thingstead, a sacred space for law and order. Dozens of men are already gathering, their faces grim, their voices low and serious. They are farmers like you, blacksmiths, and fishermen, all clad in their drab, functional woolens. They lean on their spears or rest their hands on the axe handles tucked into their belts. The presence of weapons is customary. A free man is an armed man. In the center of the circle stands the chieftain, a big man with a gray-streaked beard, and beside him, the law speaker. The law speaker is one of the most respected figures in the community. He is not a king or a judge, but a living library. His mind holds the entire legal code of your people, a complex web of traditions, precedents, and fines, all passed down orally from one generation to the next. Literacy is almost non-existent here. The law lives in this man's memory. It's a staggering feat of memorization, and his role is crucial. At the start of each thing, he will recite a portion of the law, ensuring everyone remembers the rules they live by. Today, 2 men are brought into the center of the circle. One is a neighbor you know, a farmer named Bjorn. His face is swollen and bruised. The other is a younger man from a farmstead further down the fjord, his arm held in a makeshift sling. The chieftain calls for silence, and the law speaker steps forward. He begins to speak, his voice clear and strong, reciting the laws concerning property and injury. His words are rhythmic, almost poetic, the tool to aid his memory. Then, the case begins. Bjorn accuses the younger man of moving a boundary stone between their fields in the dead of night, trying to steal a precious strip of pastureland. When Bjorn confronted him, the younger man struck him with a heavy stick, breaking his nose. The younger man shouts back his own version of the story. The stone was always in that place, and Bjorn attacked him first, dislocating his shoulder. There are no lawyers here, no robed judges. The court is the assembly of all free men present. You are the jury. The chieftain acts as a moderator, but the decision rests with the collective. Witnesses are called forward. An old man who was fishing nearby claims he saw the younger man near the boundary stone before dawn. A woman who is related to the younger man swears he was in his bed all night. It's one man's word against another's. This is the essence of Viking justice, a system built on community participation and oaths. An oath was a profoundly serious matter. A man would swear his innocence on a sacred arm ring, often dedicated to a god like Thor, or calling upon the gods to witness his truthfulness. A false oath was believed to invite divine retribution, not just on the man, but on his entire family. A fascinating, and somewhat peculiar, aspect of this legal system was the use of oath helpers. If you were accused of a crime, you could bring a number of other free men to the thing to swear to your good character. They weren't swearing that you were innocent of this specific crime, They may not have known but that you were an honorable man who was incapable of committing such a crime. The number of oath helpers required depended on the severity of the charge. It was a system based entirely on social standing and reputation. If you were a well-respected member of the community, you could easily find oath helpers. If you were a disliked loner, you were out of luck. The debate over the boundary stone rages on, the accusations growing more heated. The chieftain finally steps in, calling for a verdict. A low murmur runs through the crowd as you and the others discuss the case with those standing near you. Was the old fisherman telling the truth? Or is his eyesight failing? Is the woman lying to protect Herkin? It's impossible to be certain. This is a point of contention even among modern scholars of Old Norse law. How did they handle cases with no clear evidence? Some historians argue that the assembly often favored a compromise, a fine that both parties could live with to maintain social harmony. Others believe that in such murky situations, the judgment often fell in favor of the man with the higher social status or the more powerful family, suggesting the system was far from impartial. Finally, a consensus is reached, not through a formal vote, but through a general sense of agreement, guided by the chieftain. The younger man is found to be at fault, but given the conflicting testimonies and his own injury, the punishment is not severe. He is ordered to pay Bjorn a fine, a specific amount of silver, carefully laid out in the law code for an injury of this type, and to move the boundary stone back under the supervision of two appointed witnesses. Justice has been served. It was not a perfect, objective process. It was messy, personal, and deeply human. But for this community, it worked. The dispute is settled, the balance restored. You leave the things dead, the low afternoon sun casting long shadows from the ancient stones. The air feels heavy with the lingering tension of the law. You walk back from the thing, the scene replaying in your mind. The fine of silver, the public judgment, it all seems like a relatively clean resolution. But as you near your longhouse, you overhear two older men talking in low, serious tones. They weren't discussing the formal outcome of the assembly, but something far more personal honor. One of them spits on the ground. Bjorn took the silver, he says with contempt. A broken nose should be paid for with a broken arm, not with coins. The other man nods grimly. His father would have handled it differently. This conversation is a stark reminder of a crucial, unwritten law that governs your entire existence, the paramount importance of personal honor, or ere it's a concept that is difficult for a modern mind to fully grasp. It's not just about your reputation or how people see you. It's a tangible, spiritual quality. A person's honor is their worth, their luck, their standing not just in the community, but in the cosmos. It can be increased through brave deeds, generosity, and keeping your word, and it can be diminished or lost entirely through cowardice, oath-breaking, or, most importantly, failing to respond to an insult or injury. The legal system of the thing provides one path for resolving disputes, but there is another, older and often more respected path: personal vengeance. If someone wronged you, the most honorable response was not necessarily to drag them before the assembly, but to seek retribution yourself. This could be an eye for an eye sort of justice, where you inflict a similar injury on your offender. Or it could escalate. A seemingly minor insult could trigger a cycle of violence that could last for generations, a blood feud between two families that would claim dozens of lives. You think about the fragility of your own honor. A misplaced word, an accidental shove, a joke taken the wrong way, any of these could be interpreted as a slight, and a slight, if not addressed, would fester. It would diminish your air. People would whisper about you. They would say you lacked the courage to defend your name. Your social standing would plummet. You would become a a man without honor, the worst possible thing a Viking could be. This obsession with honor is woven into the very fabric of your language. There are specific, legally recognized forms of insult that are considered so severe they demand a violent response. For example, accusing a man of being cowardly or unmanly, a concept called which carry deep connotations of sexual passivity, was among the most serious accusations one could make. According to some law codes, a man who was insulted in this way had the right to kill the insulter on the spot without facing any legal penalty, as long as he publicly announced the killing and the reason for it afterward. You pick up your axe from where you left it by the half-finished fence. The tool feels different in your hand now. It was a simple instrument for shaping wood. Now, you're acutely aware of its other purpose. It is a symbol of your status as a free man, and the ultimate guarantor of your honor. Every man carries a weapon, and every man is expected to know how to use it. A disagreement over a stolen pig, an argument over a woman, a drunken boast in the longhouse, any of these could escalate in a heartbeat from angry words to deadly force. This is a world without a police force. There is no one to call if you are threatened. Your safety and the safety of your family depend entirely on your own strength and your willingness to use violence. Historians are still debating the true scale of this everyday violence. Some sagas paint a picture of a society rife with casual brutality, where life was cheap and feuds were constant. They are filled with tales of berserkers, duels, and revenge killings. However, archaeological evidence from graveyards doesn't always show unusually high rates of violent death compared to other contemporary European societies. This leads to an ongoing discussion were the sagas, written down hundreds of years later, exaggerating the violence for dramatic effect, or was the violence so ingrained in the resulting feuds, so socially regulated that they don't leave as clear a mark on the skeleton record as we might expect? One of the more peculiar and less understood aspects of this honor culture was the ritual of the formal insult poem. A skilled poet, a skald, could utterly destroy a man's reputation not with a weapon, but with words. They could compose a satirical, biting verse, I sir, that would mock a man's courage, appearance, or manlines. These poems were considered a form of magical attack capable of inflicting real-world shame and misfortune. In some parts of the Viking world, composing such a poem was considered as serious an offense as physical assault and was punishable by outlawry or death. It's a fascinating idea that a clever rhyme could be as deadly as a sharp axe. The sun is beginning to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The day's work is almost done. You drive the last fence post into the ground, your muscles screaming in protest. As you walk back to the longhouse, you pass Björn's farmstead. He is sitting outside, his face a mask of purple and blue, staring into the distance. You want his case at the thing. He received his silver, but the words of the old man echo in your head. In the cold calculus of honor, he may have lost more than he gained. You tighten your grip on your own axe. In this world, you understand that true security isn't found in a strong fence, but in the reputation that precedes you. A week passes. The fence is finished, and life has settled back into its monotonous rhythm of work and fatigue. The judgment of the things to have resolved the dispute between Björn and the younger man, at least on the surface, but the whispers about Björn's honor didn't die down. They festered. You hear them in the longhouse after the evening meal, quiet words exchanged over mugs of ale. You see it in the way other men look at him, a subtle lack of respect in their eyes. Unable to endure the silent judgment of his peers, has done something drastic. He has challenged the younger man, whose name you now know is Kedil, to a holmgang duel. The news spreads through the community like wildfire. This is not a drunken brawl or a spontaneous act of violence. A holmgang is a formal, ritualized duel with its own set of strict rules, the ultimate and most final way to settle a dispute of honor. It is, essentially, a state-sanctioned fight to the death, or at least to first blood, depending on the agreed-upon terms. The challenge has been accepted. There is no backing down now. On the appointed day, you and everyone else in the area make your way to a small, flat island home in the middle of the fjord. The choice of location is deliberate. It's a neutral ground, and it makes it difficult for either duelist to flee. A large cloak or animal hide, perhaps 9 feet square, is laid out on the ground and pegged down at the corners. This is the dueling arena. The rules are recited aloud by a respected elder. The fighters will stand on the hide. If a fighter steps with both feet off the hide, he is declared a knee in G, or a coward, and forfeits the duel. Each man is allowed a set number of shields, in this case 3. If a shield is broken, an attendant can provide a new one. The duelists stand face to face, their seconds beside them holding the spare shields. Bjorn is older, broader, but his movements are stiff. Ketil is younger, quicker, and his eyes burn with a mixture of fear and rage. They are not wearing armor. This is a matter of personal honor, not warfare. They are dressed in their simple woolen tunics, armed with an axe and a round shield. The signal is given. The fight begins not with a wild rush, but with a tense, cautious circling. They hold their shields high, their axes low, probing for an opening. The only sounds are the crunch of their leather shoes on the gravelly soil and their heavy breathing. The crowd is completely silent, a ring of grim faces watching the deadly drama unfold. This isn't entertainment. It's a somber, terrifying ritual. The first clash is sudden and loud. Ketil lunges forward, his axe swinging in a low arc aimed at Bjorn's legs. Bjorn catches the blow on his shield with a loud crack that echoes across the water. The force of the impact shudders through him, but he holds his ground. He retaliates with a quick, chopping blow at Ketil's head. Ketil ducks under it, the axe hissing through the air where his head was a moment before. This is the brutal reality stripped of all heroic poetry. It's clumsy, desperate, and terrifying. Their movements are not the graceful choreography of a movie. They are the awkward, lunging motions of men trying to kill each other while simultaneously avoiding being killed. Sweat beads on their foreheads despite the cold. Their knuckles are white where they grip their weapons. One of the strangest and most debated rules of the home gang concerns a practice known as shield biting. The sagas sometimes describe warriors, particularly the famous berserkers, biting the rim of their shields in a fit of rage before a fight. For a long time, historians took this literally, imagining a warrior gnawing on his shield like an animal. A more modern and plausible theory, however, suggests this might be a misunderstanding or a poetic metaphor. Some scholars now argue that shield biting might have referred to a specific fighting technique, perhaps holding the shield's rim in one's teeth for a moment to free up a hand for a two-handed weapon swing. It remains a wonderfully bizarre and unresolved piece of the Viking puzzle. Ketil, being younger and faster, presses his advantage. He rains a series of rapid blows on Bjorn's shield. The wood groans and splinters under the assault. Finally, a powerful swing from Ketil's axe shatters Bjorn's shield, sending pieces of wood flying. Bjorn stumbles back, discarding the useless handle and shield boss. His second quickly hands him a fresh shield. He has one left. The fight continues. Bjorn, now on the defensive, gives breathing heavily, his face pale. Ketil sees his chance. He fights high, then drops low again, swinging his axe in the same leg sweep he tried at the beginning. This time, Bjorn is too slow. The axe connects with his shin. It's not a clean cut, but a sickening, crunching blow. Bjorn cries out in pain and collapses to one knee, his leg buckling beneath him. The duel is over. It was a duel to first blood, and blood has been drawn. Ketil stands over him, chest heaving, his axe held ready. But he does not strike again. The rules have been satisfied. He has won. His honor is restored, proven by his victory. Bjorn's honor, on the other hand, is now utterly destroyed. He is not only injured but also shamed. As his kinsmen help him limp away, a new set of whispers begins to circulate through the crowd. The dispute over the land is forgotten. The only thing that matters now is the stark reality of victory and defeat, written in blood on the sacred ground of the home. You watch them go, a cold knot in your stomach. This is the ultimate court of appeal in your world, where the verdict is delivered by a sharpened piece of iron. Life on the farmstead moves on, the brutal spectacle of the home gang fading into the tapestry of everyday hardships. But the event has left a subtle shift in the social landscape. Kedale the victor walks with a new confidence. Bjorn is rarely seen outside his longhouse, his physical wound healing much faster than the wound to his honor. The incident serves as a recent example of how fragile a man's standing can be. It is in this atmosphere of carefully guarded reputations that talk of a new alliance begins to circulate. The chieftain's eldest daughter, Runa, has come of age. A marriage is being arranged. You learn of the details not through a grand announcement, but through the practical preparations that begin to unfold. A flurry of activity surrounds the chieftain's longhouse. Extra ale is being brewed, and a prize ox has been selected for the feast. The women are busy weaving fine new wall hangings to decorate the hall. This isn't the prelude to a love story. It is the careful execution of a strategic merger. In your world, marriage has very little to do with love or romantic attraction. It is a contract, a business deal between two families. The primary purpose is to create alliances, consolidate wealth and land, and of course, to produce heirs who will continue the family line. The feelings of the bride and groom are, at best, a secondary consideration. A good match is one that brings a family more land, more political influence, or a powerful new ally in case of a feud. A bad match can be a financial and social disaster. The groom-to-be is a man you've never seen before. He is the son of a chieftain from a settlement 2 days' journey down the coast. The union will create a powerful bond between your two communities, providing mutual support against strays from the north and strengthening their combined voice at the regional thing. The negotiations would have been complex and handled entirely by the heads of the families. They would have haggled over the details of the marriage settlement with the same shrewdness they use when trading for furs or timber. Two key financial components are at the heart of this contract. First is the bride price, or munder. This is a sum of wealth, often silver, cattle, or land that the groom's family pays to the bride's father. This is not buying a wife. Historians are very clear on this point. The mundar was a payment to the bride's guardian for transferring his authority over her to her new husband. It was a compensation for the loss of her labor and a symbol of the groom's ability to provide for her. The mundar legally validated the marriage. The second part is the morning gift, or morgengifur. This was a gift from the groom directly to his new bride on the morning after the wedding night. It was her personal property, to control and dispose of as she saw fit. This gift was a crucial measure of her security and autonomy within the marriage. A generous morning gift was a sign of the husband's respect and a tangible asset that gave the wife a degree of financial independence. The sagas are full of stories of shrewd and powerful women who used their morgengifu to influence their husbands or to provide for themselves if the marriage failed. One of the more peculiar details of the Viking wedding ceremony, and one that scholars still debate, is the role of the god Thor. Some sources suggest a hammer, symbolizing Mjolnir, was placed in the bride's lap during the ceremony. What was this? For the most common interpretation is that it was a fertility rite, calling upon the powerful god to bless the union with many children, particularly sons. But other historians suggest a different meaning. Thor was also a protector of the community and the age-allowing force. Placing the hammer in the bride's lap could have been a way of formally sanctifying her entry into her new family, and placing her under the protection of both the family's ancestors and the gods. It's a striking image, blending the sacred with the deeply practical goal of procreation. On the day of the wedding, the chieftain's longhouse is transformed. The soot-stained walls are covered with brightly colored woven tapestries depicting scenes from myth and legend. The long fire pit is roaring, roasting the entire ox. The air is thick with the smell of roasting meat, honey-sweetened ale, and the press of too many bodies packed into one space. You see the bride, Runa. She is dressed in a fine new linen kirtla, her hair unbound and flowing, crowned with a circlet of fresh flowers. She looks pale and serious. The groom and his party arrive, their boat pulled up on the shore. He is a tall, confident-looking man, dressed in a blue woolen tunic, a sign of great wealth, and a heavy silver arm ring. The ceremony itself is simple and public. The two fathers announce the terms of the agreement. The bride price is formally presented. The groom gives the bride a sword, which he will keep for their future son, a symbolic transfer of family heritage. They drink ale from a shared cup and exchange oaths, and that's it. They are married. The contract is sealed not by a priest or a holy book, but by a public declaration and the exchange of wealth. The feast that follows is a wild, loud affair that will last for 3 days. There is more food and strong ale than you have seen in a year. A skald is present, and he sings long, epic poems praising the bravery of the groom's ancestors and the beauty of the bride. It is a celebration, but underneath the noise and forced merriment, it is the ratification of a treaty. You watch Runa and her new husband sitting in the high seat. They barely speak to each other. They are strangers, bound together by the ambitions of their families. You wonder if they will ever grow to love each other, or if they will simply learn to coexist in this world that is often the most one can hope for. The wedding feast finally winds down, leaving behind a wake of leftover bones, empty ale horns, and exhausted revelers. The groom and his party depart, taking Runa with them to her new home down the coast. Her absence creates a noticeable void in the chieftain's longhouse. Her mother, the matriarch of your community, now seems to carry an extra weight of responsibility on her shoulders. As you watch her directing the cleanup, her voice sharp and clear, you get a glimpse into the complex and oft uncontradictory world of the Viking woman. On one hand, the woman of the longhouse, the HUS Freyja wields considerable power, while her husband is the public face of the family, attending the thing, leading raids, negotiating alliances. She is the absolute ruler of the domestic sphere. The longhouse and everything in it is her domain. This is symbolized by the keys she wears at her waist. They are the keys to the food chests and storehouses, the locked coffers containing the family's valuables, like silver, jewelry, and fine textiles. She controls the household's resources, manages its budget, and directs the labor of all the women, children, and slaves within the household. No one, not even her husband, would dare take food from the stores without her permission. Her authority within these walls is unquestioned. You see this authority in action every day. She is the first one up, organizing the day's tasks. She is the one who knows precisely how much salted fish and dried meat is left, and how to ration it to last until spring. She is a doctor, using her knowledge of herbs and folk remedies to treat a child's fever or a farmhand's wound. She is a textile manufacturer, overseeing the entire process from shearing the sheep to weaving the final cloth. The economic contribution of women was immense and absolutely vital for the survival of the farmstead. Viking law, in many ways, reflected this respected status. Compared to many other contemporary European societies, women in the Viking Age had significant legal rights. They could inherit property from their parents, though usually less than their brothers. A woman retained ownership of her dowry and her mourning gift throughout her marriage. Most importantly, a woman had the right to divorce her husband. If a man was abusive, failed to provide for the family, or even insulted her relatives, a woman could legally dissolve the marriage. To do so, she had to call witnesses and publicly declare her divorce, once at her bedside, once at the threshold of the longhouse, and a third time at the local thing. If the divorce was granted, she was entitled to take her personal property and her dowry with her, and was free to remarry. But this picture of empowerment has a dark side. A woman's life was still heavily constrained by the patriarchal society she lived in. Her value was often explicitly tied to her role as a wife and a mother. An unmarried woman remained under the legal guardianship of her father or a male relative. Her marriage, as you saw with Rumaid, was a transaction she had little say in. And while she could initiate a divorce, the social pressure to remain in a marriage, even a bad one, would have been immense. One of the most debated and mysterious figures in Norse society is the Volva, female seer or sorceress. These women existed outside the normal social structures. They were itinerant wanderers, believed to have the power to see the future, communicate with the gods, and practice a form of magic known as seer. The sagas describe them as incredibly powerful and often terrifying figures. When a Volva arrived at a settlement, even the most powerful chieftain would treat her with immense respect and fear, offering her the best food and a seat of honor in exchange for her prophecies. Was the Volva a real, historical figure, or is she a mythological archetype? Historians are divided. Some believe they were real women, perhaps shamans who preserved ancient religious traditions. Others argue they are literary creations, personifications of the mysterious and untamable power of fate. The discovery of a few lavish female graves containing strange staffs and pouches of herbs has fueled speculation that these might be the graves of real-life seeresses. But the evidence remains tantalizingly ambiguous. You watch the chieftain's wife. She moves with an air of purpose and weary competence. Her hands are not soft, they are calloused and stained from work, just like the men's. Her face is lined with the worry of managing a large and complex household through another harsh season. She wields her power, not with a sword or an axe, but with her ease, her knowledge, and her sharp tongue. She stops near where you are stacking firewood and points to a loose weaving on your tunic scuff. That will unravel by nightfall if you don't mend it, she says, her tone not unkind, but firm. It's a simple observation, a small moment of domestic management, but it's a reminder of her constant, vigilant oversight. Her life is a paradox. She is a paradox. She is a paradox. She is a powerful manager, a keeper of wealth, and the anchor of the household. Her fate was decided for her years ago in a marriage contract, just like the one that took her daughter away. She is both a master and a servant, a ruler of her own small kingdom, yet still a subject in a world governed by men. Her strength is not the explosive, honor-driven strength of the warrior, but a quieter, more enduring strength, as resilient and essential as the heavy roof beams of the longhouse she commands. The last of the harvest is in, the animals are secured for the winter, and a different kind of energy begins to stir in the community. It's a restless, anxious energy. The long, dark months of winter are approaching, a period of confinement, cold, and potential starvation known as the hunger gap. For some of the men, the thought of this enforced idleness is unbearable. It is in this uneasy time, between the end of the harvest and the first snowfall, that the chieftain's most fateful call can come, the summons to go Viking. You're sitting by the fire one evening, mending a leather strap, when the chieftain enters the longhouse, followed by his most trusted warriors. He stands in the center of the room, his shadow dancing on the walls, and he speaks. He talks of coastal settlements to the west, across the sea, where the land is rich and the monasteries are filled with gold and silver, guarded only by men who pray instead of fight. He speaks of the glory to be won, of the wealth that can be seized, and of the honor that comes to those who dare to risk their lives on the waves. He is not just giving a speech, he is recruiting. To go Viking fara, a Viking is not an identity. It's an activity. It means to go on a journey, an expedition. In its purest sense, it's a summer job. It's a summer job. It's what you do when the farm work is slack. Why would a simple farmer like you even consider such a thing? The sagas in popular culture paint a picture of men driven by a thirst for adventure and glory. But the reality is far more pragmatic. The most powerful motivator is simple economics. The land you farm is marginal, the soil is rocky, and the growing season is short. A bad harvest, which happens often, can mean the difference between survival and starvation. The system of inheritance, where the eldest son often inherits the farm intact, means that younger sons are left with nothing. They have no land, no wealth, and poor prospects for marriage. For these landless young men, A successful raid is their only chance to gain the startup capital needed to buy their own farm, attract a wife, and build a life. It is a desperate, high-stakes gamble. Of course, greed and glory play their parts. A successful raider can return with not just silver, but with status. He will have stories to tell, scars to show, and the respect of his peers. He will have proven his courage, increasing his honor. But these are luxuries. The gnawing, underlying driver is necessity. There is a heated discussion among scholars about the primary trigger of the Viking Age itself. What made these Scandinavian farmers suddenly erupt out into the wider world in the late 8th century? The land hunger theory you're contemplating right now is a classic one. A growing population and a shortage of good farmland in Scandinavia forced young men to seek their fortunes elsewhere. Another popular theory points to political instability. The rise of powerful kings like Harald Fairhair in Norway consolidated power and displaced many local chieftains who took to their ships with their followers to find new homes or raid their enemies. A third theory focuses on technology. The perfection of the Viking longship, with its shallow draft and superb seaworthiness, gave them the means to project their power across the sea. The truth is likely a complex cocktail of all these factors. A particularly fascinating, but less known theory suggests that a major motivation was a bride price crisis. The practice of polygamy and concubinage by wealthy chieftains may have created a shortage of available women for younger, less wealthy men. To afford the high bride price for a respectable wife, these men were forced to undertake risky ventures abroad to acquire the necessary wealth. A successful raid wasn't just about getting rich, it was about getting a wife. The chieftain's call is met with a mix of responses. The older, established men with families and land look hesitant. They have too much to lose. But the younger men, the ones with threadbare tunics and no inheritance to look forward to, their eyes gleam with a dangerous light. They are the ones who shout their assent, banging their ale horns on the tables. You are somewhere in the middle. You are not a younger son, but your family's plot of land is small and yields little surplus. Another bad winter could be catastrophic. The chieftain looks in your direction. He is not just recruiting warriors, he needs skilled hands. He needs men who can mend a sail, caulk a seam, and pull a heavy oar for hours on end. Your skills as a farmhand, your strength, your endurance, your ability to work with wooden rope are just as valuable on a ship as the skills of a seasoned fighter. The decision weighs on you. To stay means safety, but it also means the certainty of another long, hungry winter and the slow, grinding poverty of your existence. To go means facing the terror of the open sea, the chaos of battle, and a very real chance of a violent death. But it also holds the slim, glittering promise of a different life. A life where you have silver in your purse and a story worth telling. You look at your calloused hands, then at the confident face of the chieftain. You stand up and give a nod. You will go. The die is cast. You have just enlisted in one of the most dangerous occupations in the world. Your decision to join the expedition sets in motion a new undurgent kind of work. The focus of the community shifts from the fields to the shore, where the chieftain's longship rests, pulled up on the beach for the winter. It lies there like a sleeping sea serpent, its high, curving prow and stern posts reaching for the sky. It is a masterpiece of engineering, the technological marvel that makes the entire Viking Age possible. And it needs to be made ready for the sea. The ship is clinker-built, a distinct Scandinavian method of construction. The oak planks that form its hull are not placed edge to edge, but are overlapped, like shingles on a roof. These overlapping planks are then fastened together with iron rivets. This technique creates a hull that is incredibly strong, yet remarkably light and flexible. It allows the ship to bend and twist with the motion of the waves, rather than fighting against them. Your first task is one of the most tedious and essential, caulking the seams. Over the winter, the wood has dried and shrunk, opening up tiny gaps between the planks. You are given a wad of tarred animal hair, usually from sheep or goats, and a small mallet-like tool. You spend days on your hands and knees, painstakingly forcing the sticky, smelly wool into every single seam of the hull. It's messy, back-breaking work. The tar gets under your fingernails and in your hair, but you know that every inch you seal is another barrier against the cold, dark water of the North Sea. While you work, the shipwright, a man whose skills are almost magical in their precision, oversees the more complex repairs. He replaces a plank that was damaged during the last voyage, shaping the fresh oak with his adze and axe until it fits so perfectly it seems to have grown there. He checks the heavy keel, the single, massive timber that forms the backbone of the ship. He examines the mast step, a huge block of oak built into the ship's frame designed to hold the immense pressure of the single, square mast. One of the most ingenious and often overlooked features of the longship's design is its mast step system. The mast isn't just dropped into a hole. It rests in a special block called a K-Erling Old Woman and is braced by a massive, fish-shaped piece of timber called the mast fish, or biscuit bishop. This complex system distributes the force of the wind from the mast across a large section of the keel and drifts, preventing the mast from punching a hole straight through the bottom of the flexible hull. Historians and naval architects are still in awe of this sophisticated design, a perfect solution to the unique stresses placed on a vessel of this type. As you caulk, you get to know the ship intimately. You run your hands over its smooth, worn planks. You see the faint traces of carvings near the prow. You notice how the 30 reports the small, round holes for the oars are perfectly spaced. You begin to understand that this vessel is the collective effort of the entire community. The iron for the rivets was smelted and forged by the blacksmith. The wood for the planks was felled and split by lumberjacks in the forest. Made of dozens of strips of heavy wool or linen sewn together, was woven by the women over many long winter months. A single sail could take years of labor to produce. A fascinating debate among scholars revolves around a mysterious object mentioned in some sagas. The sagas describe it as a magical stone that could show the position of the sun even on a cloudy, overcast day. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure fantasy, but in recent decades, physicists and archaeologists have proposed a compelling theory. The sunstone might have been a crystal with polarizing properties like cordierite or calcite, which are found in Scandinavia. By holding such a crystal up to the sky and rotating it, a skilled navigator could detect the direction of polarized light and pinpoint the sun's hidden location with surprising accuracy. While a definitive sunstone has never been found in a Viking shipwreck, pieces of calcite have been found, leaving this as a tantalizing, almost proven piece of Viking science. Finally, the day comes to refloat the ship. It's an all-hands affair. Using logs as rollers, the entire crew, yourself included, pushes and pulls, grunting and straining, to ease the massive vessel off the beach and into the cold water of the fjord. It settles into the water with a gentle grace that belies its size. It floats high, with a remarkably shallow draft. You realize that this is the ship's secret weapon. It can sail up shallow rivers, allowing a raiding party to strike deep inland, far from coastal defenses. It can also be beached almost anywhere, making a swift landing on an enemy shore possible without the need for a deep harbor. The mast is raised, a dangerous and delicate operation requiring coordinated effort. The sail is bent onto the yardarm. Supplies are loaded barrels of fresh water, sacks of hard, dry flatbread, tubs of salted meat and fish, and your own personal weapons and sleeping furs. The ship feels alive now, a living creature eager for the sea. You find your spot on one of the simple wooden benches that also serves as a sea chest for your gear. There is no shelter, no cabin, no protection from the elements. You will eat, sleep, and work in this open, exposed space. You look at the faces of the other men. They are a mix of grim-faced veterans and nervous first-timers like yourself. The preparations are over. The journey is about to begin. The sleeping serpent is awake. The chieftain gives the order to cast off, with a final push from the men on shore. the longship glides away from the familiar coastline of your home. A rhythm is established almost immediately. The men on the starboard side dip their oars into the dark water, pulling in unison, and then the men on the port side follow. The ship moves forward with a steady, pulsing beat, like a great heart. You are on a port side oar. You find your rhythm pulling the heavy, 20-foot length of ashwood through the water, your back and shoulders already beginning to strain. For the first few hours, you stay within the protective embrace of the fjord. The water is calm, and the steep, forested cliffs on either side shield you from the wind. The mood on board is almost buoyant. Men trade jokes and boast of the riches they will acquire. An older man starts to sing a sea shanty, a monotonous but rhythmic chant that helps to time the oar strokes. But as you round the final headland and the ship meets the open sea, the mood changes instantly. The North Sea is not a gentle giant. It is a cold, gray, and unforgiving monster. The ship, which felt so large and stable in the fjord, now seems terrifyingly small and fragile. It rises and falls on the long, rolling swells of the open ocean. The gentle rocking motion is replaced by a violent, unpredictable lurching. The sky above is a vast, empty bowl of gray. The land you know, your entire world, shrinks behind you until it is just a faint, dark line on the horizon, and then it is gone. There is nothing in any direction but an endless expanse of churning, slate-colored water. A profound sense of isolation settles over you. You are a tiny speck of wooden wool in an immense, indifferent wilderness. The wind picks up, a constant, whining presence that cuts through your cloak and chills you to the bone. Sea spray, shockingly cold, whips over the side of the ship, soaking your clothes and stinging your face. Your woolen tunic, which was merely scratchy on land, now becomes a heavy, sodden weight that clings to your skin, leaching away your body heat. Within an hour, the first man is seasick. He leans over the side, his meager breakfast lost to the waves. Soon, others follow. The deck becomes a miserable landscape of groaning, retching men. There is no shame in it. It happens to even the most seasoned sailors, but it is a debilitating and miserable experience. You feel your own stomach churn, a sickening knot of nausea that rises with every swell of the waves. You fight it down, focusing on the hypnotic rhythm of the oar, the only thing that keeps your mind from spiraling into panic. Hypothermia is a constant, silent threat, even if the sun is out. The combination of the cold air, the wind, and the wet clothing can quickly drain your body's warmth. You huddle with the men on your bench, sharing what little body heat you have. Sleep is nearly impossible. There are no beds or bunks. When you are not on the oar, you try to find a semi-sheltered spot on the deck. Wrap yourself in your damp sleeping fur, then drift into a fitful, shallow sleep, constantly being jolted awake by the motion of the ship or a stray wave washing over you. One of the great historical debates about longship voyages is just how they managed these long-distance trips. Did they hug the coastline, making camp on shore each night? This would have been safer, but incredibly slow. Or did they risk the open sea, sailing day and night for a journey from Norway to England? A direct open sea crossing was much faster but infinitely more dangerous. The sagas describe both types of travel. The choice likely depended on the destination, the time of year, and the courage of the chieftain. Your chieftain, it seems, is a man who favors speed over safety. A particularly grim and seldom discussed danger of these voyages was the simple, horrifying risk of being washed overboard. In a storm, a single large wave could sweep a man from the deck in an instant. Turning a long ship around in heavy seas to attempt to rescue was extremely difficult and dangerous, and often impossible. A man who went into the icy water was likely lost forever, his cries for help swallowed by the wind and the waves. Every man on board knows this. It's an unspoken fear that hangs in the air, a constant reminder of how thin the line is between life and death out here. As night falls, the world shrinks to the confines of your ship. The gray sea turns black, indistinguishable from the starless, overcast sky. The only light comes from a single, shielded lantern that casts a feeble, flickering glow. You continue to row, your mind numb with cold, fatigue, and a growing sense of dread. The cheerful boasting of the morning is gone, replaced by a grim, stoic silence. This is the reality of going Viking. It is not a glorious adventure. It is a grueling, terrifying test of endurance, a long, cold battle against the sea itself, long before you ever see an enemy. Days bleed into one another in a monotonous cycle of rowing, shivering, and fitful sleep. The world has been reduced to the groaning timbers of the ship, the sting of salt spray, and the ache in your shoulders. The initial misery of seasickness has subsided into a dull, constant fatigue. The food is bland and repetitive, hard, dry bread that scrapes your throat, and pieces of salted fish that you have to gnaw on like leather. The water in the barrels is already beginning to taste stale and woody. You are perpetually cold, perpetually damp, and perpetually tired. But as you stare out at the endless, featureless ocean, a terrifying question begins to form in your mind. How do they know where they are going? There is no compass, no sextant, no chart with neat lines of latitude and longitude. There is only the sea and the sky. Yet the chieftain and the ship's navigator, an old man with eyes the color of the sea itself, seem completely confident. They are practicing an art that is almost lost to the world, a form of navigation that relies on deep, intuitive knowledge of the natural world. Their primary guide is the sun. On a clear day, they can track its path across the sky to get a rough sense of east and west. At midday, when the sun is at its highest point, it gives them a true south. They can even estimate their latitude, how far north or south they are, by observing the height of the midday sun above the horizon. They would have used simple, clever tools for this, perhaps a notched stick or even just the span of their own hand to measure the angle. It wasn't precise, but it was enough to keep them on the correct parallel. At night, the North Star, the unmoving point in the heavens, gives them a fixed bearing. But what about days like today, when the sky is a uniform blanket of gray cloud? This is where the true genius of the Viking navigator reveals itself. This is where the controversial sunstone would have come into play, allowing them to find the sun through the clouds. But even without it, they have other cues. The old navigator seems to be reading the waves themselves. He observes the direction of the long, rolling ocean swells, which often maintain a consistent direction set by distant weather systems independent of the local, wind-driven waves. He is using the memory of the ocean to guide him. He also watches the wildlife. The flight path of certain seabirds, like gannets or guillemots, can indicate the direction of their nesting grounds on land. A flock of birds heading purposefully in one direction at dawn or dusk is a living compass. The appearance of a specific type of fish or whale could also signal that they were approaching a known feeding ground, and therefore, a particular part of the sea. It's a form of natural GPS, coded into the behavior of the creatures around them. A wonderfully bizarre and debated piece of their navigational toolkit was the bearing dial. This was a wooden disc, found in Greenland, with notches around the edge, combined with a central pin to cast a shadow. It could have been a simple but effective portable sundial. However, some scholars propose a more complex use. They suggest it could have been used in conjunction with the sunstone to plot a course, or even to find latitude. The exact function of the bearing dial is still a hot topic in the world of experimental archaeology, with enthusiasts building replicas and testing them on the open sea to try and crack their secrets. The Vikings also had an encyclopedic knowledge of coastlines, passed down through oral tradition. They had mental maps, described in sagas and poems, detailing sailing directions from one point to another. These weren't maps in our sense, but a series of instructions: sail west from Bergen for 2 days until you see the islands that look like a sleeping dog, then turn south. This knowledge was a priceless commodity, the collective experience of generations of sailors, stored in the minds of men like your ship's navigator. You watch him now. He stands near the stern, next to the steersman who controls the large side rudder or steerboard. He's not looking at any instrument. He's tasting the wind, feeling the motion of the ship, his gaze fixed on some point far beyond what you can see. He is part of a tradition that is almost entirely extinct, a deep, instinctual connection to the environment that we can barely imagine. And then there is the role of faith. When all else failed, they had their belief in the gods and in their own personal luck, or Hemingya a man's luck was seen as an almost tangible force that could guide him and protect him. A chieftain with a reputation for good luck would attract more followers, as his luck was believed to extend to the entire ship. They would have made offerings to the sea god, Njord, or perhaps to the Stormbringer, Thor asking for a safe passage. This reliance on the supernatural wasn't a substitute for skill, but a supplement to it. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the thing you relied on when the clouds were too thick, the waves too chaotic, and the birds nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, the navigator points to the port side. "Land," he says, his voice a low rasp. You and the other men scramble to look. At first you see nothing but the grey horizon, but then, as you crest a large swell, you see it. A dark, low smudge, so faint it's almost a mirage. It is land. After days at sea, lost in a world of water, this man has found a tiny, specific piece of coastline using nothing but the wind, the waves, the stars, and the knowledge in his head. A wave of relief, so profound it almost brings you to your knees, washes over you. You are not lost. The ordeal of the sea is almost over, but as you get closer, a new and different kind of tension begins to build on the ship. The challenge of survival is about to be replaced by the business of violence. The faint smudge on the horizon slowly resolves itself into a solid coastline. It's a low green shore, dramatically different from the rocky fjords of your homeland. There are no steep cliffs, no snow-capped mountains. Instead, gentle hills roll down to meet the sea, and the fields are a patchwork of impossibly vibrant greens. It looks soft, fertile, and peaceful. It looks rich. The mood on the longship has transformed completely. The lethargy of the long voyage has vanished, replaced by a tense, focused energy. Men who were slumped in exhausted heaps are now sitting upright, their eyes fixed on the approaching shore. The quiet murmur of conversation has ceased. The only sounds are the rhythmic creak of the oars, the slap of water against the hull, and the sharp, metallic sound of men checking their weapons. You watch as a veteran warrior next to you pulls his axe from his sea chest. He runs a whetstone along its curved blade with practiced, circular motions, the sheke 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 sound setting your teeth on edge. He is not looking at the axe, his gaze is locked on the land. His face is a blank mask, but you can see a familiar light in his eyes, the same cold fire you saw in Kedil's ire. It is the face of a farmer or a sailor. It is the face of a predator. The chieftain gathers the most experienced warriors at the stern for a quiet, intense conference. They are too far away for you to hear, but you can see them pointing at the coastline, formulating a plan. They are looking for the signs of a good target, a small river mouth that would allow the ship to travel inland unseen, a plume of smoke that might indicate a settlement, or, most prized of all, the stone tower of a church. Your own fear, the gnawing dread of the open sea, has been replaced by a new, sharper kind of anxiety. Your heart is pounding in your chest, a frantic drumbeat against your ribs. Your mouth is dry. You pull your own weapon from your chest, a simple, sturdy spear with an iron head. It feels heavy and unfamiliar in your hands. You've used a spear for hunting boar, but you've never pointed it at another man. You look at its sharp tip and feel a wave of nausea that has nothing to do with the motion of the ship. One of the great puzzles for historians is the question of Viking navigation and targeting. How did they so consistently find the richest, most vulnerable targets, especially in the early days of raiding? The first major recorded raid on the monastery of Lindefsturn in 793 AD was a shocking blow to Christian Europe precisely because it was so unexpected and so perfectly executed. Some scholars believe that the first raids were almost accidental, the result of trading voyages gone wrong or exploratory missions that stumbled upon undefended wealth. However, a more compelling theory suggests that the Vikings had a sophisticated intelligence-gathering network. Scandinavian merchants and traders had been crisscrossing the North Sea for decades before the raiding era began. They would have returned home with more than just goods. They would have brought back information about political instability in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, maps of river systems, and most importantly, detailed accounts of the immense, portable wealth, gold chalices, jeweled book covers, silver relics hoarded in the wealthy and completely undefended coastal monasteries. The raiders weren't sailing blind, they were often acting on very good intel. A less discussed but equally plausible factor is the role of exiled nobles. An Anglo-Saxon or Frankish nobleman who lost a power struggle at home might flee to Scandinavia, seeking refuge and allies. In exchange for support, he would have offered what he knew best: the locations of his rivals' estates, the weaknesses in their defenses, and the precise whereabouts of their wealth. Some of the most successful Viking raids may have been guided by local informants with a grudge. The chieftain points to a spot on the coast where a small river empties into the sea. It's a perfect, sheltered landing spot, hidden from view from the open ocean. The order is given to lower the sail. The ship will proceed under the power of oars alone, silently. The rhythmic chant of the sea shanty is long gone. The only sound now is the muffled splash of the oars dipping into the water. Every man knows that surprise is their greatest weapon. You grip your spear, your knuckles white. The green, peaceful-looking land no longer seems inviting. It seems alien and hostile. You don't know its place. You don't know its people, its language, or its customs. You are the invader here, a stranger in a strange land. You look at the faces of the men around you. Some, like the veteran with his axe, look eager. Others, mostly the younger first-timers like yourself, look as terrified as you feel. The ship glides into the mouth of the river. The air changes. The sharp, salty smell of the sea is replaced by the earthy scent of mud, wet leaves, and livestock. You can hear the bleating of sheep from a nearby field. It's a sound so familiar, so domestic, it's deeply unsettling in this context. It's a reminder that this peaceful-looking place is a home, just like your home, and you are here to violate it. The relief you felt at seeing land has completely evaporated. In its place is a cold, heavy certainty. The worst part of this journey is just about to begin. The longship glides up the shallow river, its hull scraping softly against the muddy bottom. The chieftain gives a silent hand signal, and the men raise their oars from the water, letting the ship's momentum carry it to a soft halt against the grassy bank. The landing is eerily quiet. For a moment, nobody moves. The only sound is the gentle lapping of the river against the hull and the distant, oblivious bleating of sheep. Then the command comes, a low, guttural word from the chieftain. The spell is broken. The organized chaos begins. The men nearest the side of the ship leap over the gunwale into the shallow water with a splash, holding their shields and weapons high. You follow, your feet sinking into the cold, soft mud of the riverbed. The shock of the icy water on your legs jolts you, but the rush of adrenaline is stronger. You scramble up the slippery bank, your heart hammering against your ribs. You're on firm soil. The grass is wet with dew. The air is still and heavy. You and the other 50 or 60 men from the ship quickly form a loose, disorganized group on the riverbank. This is not the disciplined, orderly formation of a Roman legion. It is a rough, unruly mob of individual warriors, held together only by their loyalty to the chieftain. The chieftain points his sword towards a thin column of smoke rising above a small cluster of trees a half-mile inland. A settlement, a farmstead, or a small village. That is the target. The order to advance is given, and the group moves forward, not in neat ranks but in a scattered, jogging wave. Some men are shouting now. A low guttural war cry meant to build their own courage and to terrify their unseen enemy. The famous berserker rage, a state of frenzied, uncontrollable fury described in the sagas, is a subject of intense historical debate. Was it a real psychological state, perhaps induced by hallucinogenic mushrooms, hyperventitional, or a form of self-hypnosis? Or was it a literary trope, a way of describing a warrior's exceptional ferocity in battle? Some scholars even suggest it was a calculated act of psychological warfare, a warrior pretending to be a wild, uncontrollable animal to intimidate his opponents. Whatever its origin, you see a glimpse of it now in the wide, unfocused eyes of a few of the veteran warriors, as they begin to chant and work themselves into a state of aggression. The advance across the open fields feels like an eternity. Your legs are heavy, and the spear in your hand feels slick with sweat. You are acutely aware of how exposed you are. Every tree, every dip in the ground, seems like a potential ambush point. The reality of a Viking raid was often far from the glorious, one-sided slaughter depicted in fiction. They were frequently met with fierce resistance. Local FYRDs, or militias, composed of farmers and villagers, could be mustered quickly. A raiding party that was too slow or too careless could easily find itself surrounded and cut off from its ship, its only escape route. A fascinating piece of evidence that speaks to this reality is the discovery of mass graves, such as the one found near Weymouth in England. It contained the bodies of over 50 Scandinavian men, all of whom had been executed, their heads severed and piled separately. This was not of a failed raid. The raiders were captured and systematically dispatched by the local Anglo-Saxons. It's a grim reminder that going Viking was a gamble that did not always pay off. As you get closer to the trees, you can hear new sounds. A dog barking frantically. A shout of alarm in a language you don't understand. The element of surprise is gone. They know you are here. The shouting from your own group intensifies, becoming a roar. You break through the tree line and see the settlement. It's a small, poor-looking village. A handful of wattle daub huts clustered around a larger wooden hall. The chaos erupts. There is no grand strategy here, no clever flanking maneuvers. It is a mad, violent scramble. A few local men, armed with wood-cutting axes and pitchforks, try to mount it desperate, hopeless defense at the edge of the village. They are cut down in a flurry of blows before they can even get organized. The raiders surge into the village, fanning out, each man for himself, hoping to find the local lord and his valuables. Others start kicking in the doors of the smaller huts, looking for anything worth stealing. You find yourself standing at the entrance to one of these small, dark huts. You can hear someone crying inside. This is the moment of truth. You are not a battle-hardened warrior. You are a farmer. Your goal is not glory, it is survival and profit. You are here for plunder, not for a fight. You hesitate for a fraction of a second, your knuckles white on the shaft of your spear. The air is filled with the sounds of splintering wood, shouts of rage, and cries of terror. This is the brutal, terror, and utterly unglamorous reality of a beach landing. It's a messy, frightening scramble for dominance, driven by a raw and desperate greed. And you are right in the middle of it. You kick the flimsy door of the hut open. It swims inward with a pathetic creak. The inside is dark and smells of peat smoke and fear. A woman is huddled in the corner, shielding two small children. She looks at you, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it feels like a physical force. She is not seeing a man. She is seeing a monster from the sea, a devil with a spear in his hand. For a heartbeat, you see not a target, but a reflection of your own world, a mother in a small, smoky home, protecting her young. The thought is disorienting, but there is no time for hesitation. Another raider, a burly man with a red beard, pushes past you into the hut. He ignores the woman and children, his eyes scanning the small space for anything of value. He kicks over a small wooden chest, spilling its meager contents, a few pieces of pottery, a bone comb, some homespun cloth. He curses in frustration, grabs a small silver brooch from the woman's cloak, and moves on to the next hut. The entire encounter takes less than 10 seconds. You step back out into the daylight, your heart pounding. The raid is in full swing, a whirlwind of violent acquisition. You look around and see that the primary target of the most experienced warriors was not this poor village after all. They are moving past it, towards a stone structure visible on a nearby hill. A church. This is the key to understanding the Viking Age. While you and the other lower-ranking members of the crew are ransacking peasant huts for scraps, the real prize lies elsewhere. Why were churches and monasteries such frequent targets? It wasn't necessarily out of religious animosity. The Vikings were pagans, yes, but their motivation was overwhelmingly economic, not theological. Christian monasteries in the 8th and 9th centuries were the banks of their day. They were entries of immense wealth, accumulated over generations through gifts from kings and nobles seeking to buy their way into heaven. These monasteries held vast treasures. They had gospel books bound in covers of pure gold and studded with jewels. They had solid silver chalices, ornate reliquaries decorated with precious gems, and fine silk vestments. And most importantly, this incredible wealth was protected by almost nothing. The inhabitants were monks, men of peace, forbidden from carrying weapons. The buildings were designed for prayer, not defense. For a Viking raider, a monastery was the perfect target, maximum reward for minimum risk. It was like finding a bank with the vault door wide open and all the guards on vacation. You can hear the sounds of the attack on the church now, the splintering crash, as the heavy oak doors are battered down, followed by shouts and screams. You start to move towards it, drawn by the prospect of real loot. The initial chaos of the raid is beginning to coalesce around this central point. A fascinating and often misunderstood aspect of these raids is what the Vikings chose to take and what they left behind. They were not interested in bulky, hard-to-transport items. They wanted portable wealth. A beautifully illuminated manuscript, a priceless work of art to a monk, was valuable to a Viking only for the jewels on its cover. They would often rip the covers off and throw the vellum pages away. Archaeologists have found evidence of this, such as this single orphan jewel from a book cover found at a Viking site. Their primary interest was in precious metals, gold and silver. They would often chop up the beautiful silver chalices and plates into smaller, more portable pieces, what archaeologists call hack silver. This silver was valued purely by its weight. It was bullion, a raw currency to be melted down or used in trade. As you approach the church, you see a group of monks being herded out, their hands bound. They are terrified, chanting prayers under their breath. The raiders are emerging from the church now, their arms full of loot. One man has a golden cross slung over his shoulder. Another is stuffing a silver plate into a sack. The chieftain is directing the operation, pointing out the most valuable items, ensuring an orderly collection of the plunder. You see a warrior smash a beautiful stained glass window, not out of malice, but simply to get a better grip on a silver candlestick just inside. The act seems to encapsulate the entire encounter, a clash of two worlds with completely different value systems. To the monks, the window was a sacred story told in lightened color. To the Viking, it was just an obstacle. Historians still debate the long-term psychological impact of these raids on European society. The attack on Lindisfarne in 793 sent a shockwave across the Christian world. The scholar Alcuin of York wrote, "Never before has such a terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heathens poured out the blood of saints around the altar, and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets. This was not just a robbery, it was a profound sacrilege, a violation of the sacred order of the world. It was this terror, as much as the economic loss, that cemented the image of the Viking as a demonic, destructive force. The raid is over in less than an hour. The chieftain gives the signal to withdraw. The group moves back towards the ship, laden with plunder and pushing their captured monks ahead of them. The village is left smoldering, a scene of quiet devastation. You look back at the small hut you entered. The woman and her children are gone, likely fled into the woods. You have nothing in your hands. You are one of the monsters from the sea. The ship is waiting. You scramble back aboard the longship, your legs shaking, your mind a whirlwind of noise and fear. The deck, which felt so vast and empty on the voyage over, is now a chaotic mess of men and plunder. Sacks of stolen goods are piled high. The golden cross from the church lies gleaming against a coil of rope. The air is thick with the smell of sweat and smoke and the triumphant, adrenaline-fueled shouts of the other men. The captured monks are shoved into the center of the ship, where they huddle together, a small island of black robes and terrified prayers in a sea of leather and iron. They are weeping, their faces pale with shock. You look at them, and then at the pile of treasure. And it's then that you realize the most valuable loot from this raid isn't the silver or the gold. It's the people. The Viking slave trade was a massive, brutal, and incredibly profitable enterprise that formed the backbone of the Scandinavian economy for centuries. It is a side of their world that is often downplayed or ignored in popular culture, which prefers to focus on warriors and explorers. But the reality is that much of the wealth of the Viking Age was built on the buying and selling of human beings. These captured monks are not just prisoners, they are cargo. They have a price. A healthy, strong man, particularly one with valuable skills, could be worth a significant amount of silver in the slave markets of Edinburgh or Dublin. Scribes were especially prized, as literacy was a rare and useful skill. A captured priest might be ransomed back to his community for an enormous sum. The raiders are not just looting, they are harvesting. The men and women captured in raids were called thralls, the lowest rung in the three-tiered Norse society of thralls, Karl's freemen, and Jarl-s aristocrats. Their lives were completely at the mercy of their owners. They could be bought, sold, beaten, or killed with impunity. They did the hardest, most grueling work on the farmsteads, digging ditches, mucking out animal stalls, and serving the needs of the household. Female thralls were especially vulnerable, expected to provide sexual services to their master's sons. Any children they bore would also be born into slavery. The scale of this trade was staggering. Viking slavers roamed far and wide. They raided the coastlines of Britain and France, but also ventured deep into the rivers of Russia, capturing Slavic people, the very origin of the word slave, and selling them in the great markets of the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Caliphate. DNA studies of the Icelandic population have revealed a fascinating, ungrim legacy of this trade. The mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down through the female line, shows a significant percentage of Gaelic, Irish, and Scottish ancestry, while the Y-chromosome DNA, passed down through the male line, is overwhelmingly Scandinavian. The story this tells is the founding population of Iceland was largely composed of Norsemen and the Gaelic women they had captured and enslaved. One of the most chilling and debated historical accounts of the thrall system comes from the Arab diplomat Ahmad ibn Fadlan, the same man who described the tattered Rus Vikings. He provided a graphic eyewitness account of a ship burial for a Rus chieftain on the Volga River. As part of the funeral ritual, one of the chieftain's female thralls volunteered to be sacrificed and buried with him. Ibn Fadl describes in disturbing detail how she was plied with strong drink and then ritually killed by an old woman known as the Angel of Death before being placed on the funeral pyre with her master. Historians are still arguing about this account. Was this a common practice, or rare, extreme ritual specific to this group of Rus, and how voluntary was the thrall's choice? It's a horrifying glimpse into a world where a person's life could be so utterly devalued. You look at the captured monks. They are not warriors. They are scholars, farmers, and administrators. Back in their monastery, they were respected members of their community. Here, on the deck of this ship, they are nothing more than property, their value calculated in silver. One of the raiders offers a piece of hard bread to a young monk, who flinches away as if he has been offered poison. The raider laughs, a harsh, cruel sound. The chieftain finishes a quick inventory of the loot and gives the order to push off. The longship is maneuvered back down the river and out into the open sea. The mood is completely different from the outbound journey. The men are loud and boisterous, passing around a stolen cask of wine and boasting of their deeds. They are rich. They have survived, but you feel a cold emptiness inside. You look at the glittering pile of treasure and the weeping group of captives. The two are inseparable. The wealth is built on this misery. You didn't strike a blow. You didn't steal a single coin. But by being here, by being part of the crew, you are complicit in all of it. The wind catches the big square sail, and the ship begins to move quickly, leaving the despoiled coast behind. You are heading home, but the world you are returning to will never look the same. The journey home is faster than the voyage out. The wind is at your back, and the sail is full. The mood of triumphant celebration, however, begins to fade after the first day, replaced by a tense and growing anxiety. A new enemy has come aboard, one more insidious than a storm-armed opponent infection. One of the veteran warriors, a man named Sten, took a shallow cut on his forearm during the raid. It was nothing serious, just a glancing blow from a peasant's pitchfork that barely broke the skin. He washed it with a bit of ale and thought nothing more of it. But now, 2 days later, the wound is angry and red. The skin around it is hot and swollen, and ugly red streaks are beginning to creep up his arm. He is shivering, despite being wrapped into layers of fur, and his eyes are glassy with fever. You watch as the ship's unofficial medic, an old woman who came on the voyage to tend to the cooking, examines the arm. Her medicine chest is a small leather pouch containing a few dried herbs and a pot of foul-smelling grease. She mutters a charm under her breath and applies a poultice of chewed-up yarrow leaves to the wound. Yarrow was a common battlefield remedy, known as woundwort for its ability to staunch bleeding. But it's no match for what is happening to Sten. In your world, there is no understanding of germ theory. No one knows about bacteria or microbes. Sickness is a mystery, often attributed to bad air, an imbalance of humors, or the displeasure of the gods or malevolent spirits. A wound becomes infected not because of invisible organisms, but because of a venom or an evil wind that has entered the body. The treatments are based on a mixture of practical herbalism, passed down experience, and pure superstition. Viking medical knowledge, as far as we can reconstruct it, was surprisingly sophisticated in some areas and terrifyingly primitive in others. They were skilled at setting broken bones, using splints and tight bindings to hold the limb in place. Archaeological finds of well-healed fractures on Viking skeletons prove their effectiveness in orthopedic care. They also likely practiced a rudimentary form of surgery. Trepanation, the drilling of a hole in the skull to relieve pressure, was known in many ancient cultures, and some evidence suggests the Vikings may have practiced it too. One of the most fascinating undebated aspects of Viking medicine is the testing of abdominal wounds. The sagas describe a specific diagnostic procedure. If a man received a deep wound to his stomach, he would be given a strong-smelling onion and leek soup to drink. After a short time, the healer would smell the wound. If they could smell the onions through the wound, it meant the intestinal wall had been perforated, and the injury was considered unreadable. The man would be left to die as comfortably as possible. It's a grimly practical, and likely effective, way of determining the severity of an internal injury in an age before exploratory surgery. But for an infection like Sten's, their medical kit was woefully inadequate. They had no antibiotics, no antiseptics. The infection, now in his bloodstream, is spreading rapidly. By the third day, he is delirious, muttering nonsense and thrashing in his fever. The red streaks have reached his shoulder. The chieftain looks at him with a mixture of pity and cold pragmatism. Sten is now a liability. He is taking up space and resources, and his cries are unnerving the rest of the crew. There is nothing anyone can do but watch him die. And it is not a quick or noble death. It is a slow, agonizing decline. his breathing becomes ragged, his body convulses, and a foul smell begins to emanate from the gangrenous wound. You and the other men avoid that section of the ship. Your face is a mixture of fear and disgust. You look at your own hands, at the small nicks and scratches you've accumulated from the work on the ship and the raid. Each one is a potential death sentence. This was the brutal reality for any warrior or worker in the ancient world. It wasn't always the spectacular, fatal blow in battle that killed you. More often, it was the aftermath. A small cut, a splinter, a broken bone that pierced the skin. Any of these could lead to sepsis, gangrene, or tetanus. A man could survive a dozen battles, only to be killed by a rusty nail he stepped on back at the farm. This constant, invisible threat was a fundamental part of life, a background noise of risk that everyone simply had to accept. On the fourth day, Sten dies. His body, already beginning to decay, is wrapped in his sleeping friend, with a brief, muttered prayer to the sea god, slipped over the side of the ship. It disappears into the grey water with a small splash. There is no ceremony. There is only a grim sense of relief. The space he occupied is quickly cleared. His share of the treasure will be divided among the rest of the crew. The incident casts a long shadow over the rest of the voyage. The triumphant mood is gone for good. Every man is now acutely aware of his own mortality. They look at the captured monks, who, despite their terror, are at least healthy. They look at the pile of gold and silver, which now seems to have a dark stain on it. The raid was a success. They won the battle. But they have lost a man, not to an enemy sword, but to an enemy sword, but to an invisible foe that came from a simple scratch. And that, in many ways, is a far more terrifying thought. Landfall. After the tense and somber final days at sea, the sight of your own coastline is a balm to the soul. The familiar shape of the fjords, the dark green of the pine forests, it's a beauty you never fully appreciated until now. As the longship navigates the final channel towards your home settlement, a horn is blown from the shore. The people who stayed behind have seen you. They are gathering on the beach, their faces a mixture of hope and trepidation. The mood on the ship lifts one final time. The men stand a little taller, their fatigue momentarily forgotten. They are returning not just as survivors, but as providers. They have faced the sea, fought a battle, and brought back wealth that will see the community through the coming winter. As the ship grinds to a halt on the familiar shore, a cheer goes up from the waiting crowd. But the triumphant return is fraught with its own set of risks. A ship laden with treasure is a tempting target. Loyalty in this world is a fluid thing. A rival chieftain from a neighboring fjord, hearing of your successful raid, might see this as an opportune moment to strike, hoping to seize your hard-won loot before it can be properly secured. The journey isn't truly over until the treasure is safely inside the longhouse. The unloading process begins immediately, a swift and organized operation. The sacks of silver and gold are the first things to come off the ship, carried by the chieftain's most trusted warriors directly to his longhouse. The thralls are herded off next, their eyes wide with fear and confusion as they take in the strange, rugged landscape of their new prison. They are quickly separated, the most valuable, the literate monks, being led to the chieftain's hall, while the others are divided among the warriors who participated in the raid, a living, breathing part of their share of the plunder. This division of the loot is a critical and potentially contentious moment. The system for sharing plunder is a subject of some debate among historians. The sagas suggest a relatively formal system. The chieftain, as the organizer and leader of the expedition, would take the largest share, perhaps a quarter, or even a third of the total haul. He would also get his pick of the finest items, the best sword, the most valuable piece of jewelry, the most skilled thrall. The rest of the loot would then be divided among the crew. An experienced warrior might get a full share, while a young first-timer, or a man who primarily worked the oars, might only get a half share. It was a merit-based system designed to reward skill and bravery, but it was also a recipe for resentment if a man felt he had been shortchanged. A particularly curious and rare find that sheds light on this process is the spilling S hoard discovered in Sweden. This massive treasure contained, among other things, a huge number of Islamic dirhams, silver coins from the Middle East. Many of these coins had been deliberately nicked or pecked with a knife point. Why, the prevailing theory is that this was a way for Vikings to test the purity of the silver. But another, more recent suggestion is that this pecking was a form of accounting. A chieftain might mark all the coins in a pile to signify they had been counted and were ready for division. It's a small, physical trace of the complex administrative work that went into managing the profits of a raid. You watch as the treasure is laid out on the floor of the chieftain's longhouse. It's a dazzling sight, a glittering pile of gold, silver, and jewels gleaming in the firelight. The chieftain stands over it, his face stern, as he begins the process of division. He calls each man forward, one by one, and hands him his portion. When your turn comes, he places a small handful of hack silver and a single, plain silver arm ring into your outstretched hands. It feels strangely heavy. This is what you risked your life for. It's enough to buy a small plot of land or perhaps a cow. It's enough to ensure your family won't starve this winter. It is the price of a man's life, Sten's life. But the return journey holds one final, invisible danger. You and the other men have not just brought back silver and thralls. You may have brought back diseases to which your home community has no immunity. Throughout history, the movement of armies and travelers has been a primary vector for the spread of epidemics. A mild sickness from a foreign land can become a devastating plague when introduced to a new, immunoglacially naive population. While the Viking Age wasn't marked by massive pandemics on the scale of the Black Death, the risk was always present. The sniffles you picked up in a damp English village could become a deadly respiratory illness that sweeps through your longhouse. This is a risk that neither you nor any of your companions would ever understand. A silent, microscopic stowaway hidden among the treasure. As the celebration feast begins that night, the longhouse loud with song and drink, you hold your silver arm ring in your hand. You are richer than you were when you left. You have survived. The journey has stripped away any romantic notions you may have had about glory and adventure. You have seen the cold indifference of the sea, the chaotic brutality of a raid, and the slow, undignified death of a companion. You have seen the terror in a captive's eyes. The full price of this small piece of silver is a weight that you will carry long after the feast is over. The raid is over. The treasure is divided. The captured thralls have been absorbed into the fabric of the household. Life on the surface should return to normal. The rhythms of the farmstead should reassert themselves. But they don't. Not for you. The journey has left an indelible mark on your psyche, a wound that doesn't show on the skin. You find it impossible to sleep through the night. You lie on your straw bed in the smoky darkness of the longhouse, but every time you close your eyes, you are back on the ship. You hear the splintering crash of the church door, the screams of the monks. You see the fear in the eyes of the woman in the hut, a face that now haunts your waking hours as much as your dreams. These are not glorious memories of adventure. They are intrusive, fragmented images of terror and violence. What you are experiencing is something your culture has no name for, but which a modern observer might recognize as post-traumatic stress. In a society that glorifies warrior strength and emotional stoicism, there is no language to describe this kind of internal injury. There is no concept of mental health, no therapy, no support group. A man is expected to be tough, to swallow his fears, and to get on with his work. Any admission of psychological distress would be seen as a sign of weakness, a shameful lack of manly courage. You tried to talk about it once, attempting to share some of the horror with an older man who stayed behind. You mention the woman in the hut. The old man just claps you on the shoulder and laughs. A warrior takes what he wants, he says, his voice booming. You have silver in your purse and a story to tell. That is what matters. You fall silent. You realize there is no one here who can understand. You are utterly alone with your ghosts. This internal conflict is a subtle but profound aspect of the Viking experience that is rarely explored. The sagas are full of heroes who perform incredible feats of violence without any apparent psychological consequence. They kill, they raid, they watch their friends die, and then they go home and compose a poem about it. But this is almost certainly a literary convention. Real human beings do not process violence and trauma so easily. Historians and psychologists have begun to re-examine the sagas through the lens of modern trauma theory, looking for the hidden cracks in the heroic facade. Some scholars argue that certain behaviors described in the sagas might be expressions of unresolved trauma. The berserker rage, for instance, could be interpreted not just as a battle tactic, but as a dissociative state, a way for a warrior to mentally detach himself from the horrific acts he is committing. The legendary moodiness and sudden fits of rage of heroes like Egil Skall Agrimeses could be seen as symptoms of PTSD. The high rates of feuding and seemingly irrational violence in the society might, in part, be fueled by a population of traumatized young men unable to process their experiences in a healthy way. This is a highly speculative field of study, as we can't put a long-dead Viking on a therapist's couch, but it offers a more nuanced and compassionate view of the people behind the legends. A more peculiar, and potentially related, phenomenon was the concept of the Dr. August R.A. Drive August, or was not a simple ghost. It was the reanimated corpse of the dead, retaining its physical body and a malevolent intelligence. They were described as supernaturally strong, smelling of decay, and filled with a consuming envy for the living. They would guard their burial mounds, attack livestock, and haunt the homes of their living relatives. What is fascinating is who was believed to become a Drive Augustar. It was often unpopular, greedy, or particularly violent people. A man who was killed in a manner that was perceived as unjust or whose death rituals were not properly observed was also at high risk. Could the idea of the Dr. August or the restless, violent dead who refused to stay buried be a cultural manifestation of unresolved grief and trauma, a way for a community to personify the lingering, toxic presence of a violent past? It's a compelling and eerie thought. You try to lose yourself in the familiar rhythms of your work. You mend your fishing nets, chop firewood, and check on the livestock. But the world feels different. The sounds and smells of the farm, which were once comforting, now seem dull and lifeless. The laughter and stories in the longhouse at night feel hollow. You feel disconnected, an observer in your own life. You sometimes see the new thralls at work. One of them, the young monk who flinched from the bread on the ship, is now tasked with cleaning out the animal pens. His fine, scholar's hands are raw and blistered. His face is a mask of quiet despair. You avoid his gaze. His presence is a constant, living reminder of what you were a part of. He is a piece of your trauma, walking and breathing right here in your home. The silver arm ring on your wrist feels less like a trophy and more like a manacle. It binds you to the memory of the raid. You have returned from your great adventure, but a part of you is still out there, lost in the cold gray sea, forever kicking in a door to a small, dark hut. You have survived the Viking Age for a day, a week, a season. But you are beginning to understand that some wounds don't bleed, and some battles are never truly over. As the days shorten and the first hints of winter bite the air, the presence of the new thralls becomes a stark and constant feature of life on the farmstead. They are a silent, shadowy workforce, moving through the background of your daily existence. You see them hauling water from the well, turning the heavy millstone to grind grain, and shivering in the cold as they muck out the byre. They are the invisible engine that keeps the household running, and their world is one of utter subjugation. You are assigned one of the new thralls, a young Anglo-Saxon man named Wulfstan, to help you with your work. He was captured from the village, not the monastery. He is not a scholar or a priest, he is a farmer, just like you. But here, he is not your peer. He is your property, The chieftain gave him to you as part of your share of the plunder. He is a tool, like your axe or your spear. His world is one of complete powerlessness. He sleeps on the cold, damp floor at the far end of the longhouse, near the animals. He eats the scraps left over after the free members of the family have finished their meal. He wears the most tattered, threadbare clothing. He cannot own property. He cannot marry without your permission. He cannot leave the farmstead. If he tries to run away and is caught, the punishment is severe: a branding on the forehead or even the severing of a foot to prevent future attempts. You try to give him an order, to tell him to help you mend a broken cartwheel. You speak in your own Norse tongue, but he just stares at you with a blank, uncomrefined look. You realize you cannot even communicate. The language barrier is a wall between you. You resort to grunts and gestures, pointing at the wheel and then at the tools. He eventually understands and begins to work, his movements slow and clumsy, his eyes constantly downcast. This communication barrier is a detail often overlooked. While Old Norse and Old English were related Germanic languages, allowing for some basic level of understanding between traders, the dialects and accents would have made complex communication very difficult. For a captive torn from his home, the inability to understand his captors or express his own needs would have been a profound and terrifying form of isolation. The legal and social status of thralls is a topic that historians, drawing from law codes and sagas, have pieced together in grim detail. A master had the right of life and limb over his thrall. While killing a thrall without cause was sometimes frowned upon and might require a small fine to be paid to the chieftain, it was not considered murder. The social chasm was absolute. A free man could not be friends with a thrall. Eating at the same table or sharing a drink with a thrall would be a source of shame. And yet, the line was not always so clear. There was a path to freedom, however narrow. A thrall could be freed by their master, a process called leasing. This was often done as a reward for long and loyal service. A thrall could also, in theory, buy his own freedom if he could somehow acquire the necessary wealth, though this was extremely rare. A freedman, or Lasengi, occupied a strange middle ground in society. He was no longer a slave, but he was not fully free either. He remained a client of his former master, owing him loyalty and service. It could take 2 or 3 generations for a family to fully shed the taint of thralldom and become accepted as truly free. One of the most peculiar and debated aspects of this system is the thrall's trial described in some sources. If a thrall was suspected of a crime, like theft, their guilt or innocence was not determined by the thing. Instead, they might be subjected to an ordeal. A common one was the ordeal of hot water, where the thrall had to retrieve a stone from a cauldron of boiling water. Their hand would be bandaged, and if it healed cleanly after 3 days, they were declared innocent. They were guilty. This wasn't a search for truth, it was a ritual designed to reinforce the existing power structure, leaving the thrall's fate in the hands of chance and divine judgment, as interpreted by their masters. Working alongside Wulfstan is a deeply uncomfortable experience. His silent, subjugated presence is a constant mirror, reflecting a distorted image of yourself. He knows how to mend a cartwheel, how to judge the weather, how to handle livestock. In another life, you could have been neighbors, sharing a drink and complaining about a poor harvest. But the raid has irrevocably changed that. You are now his master, and he is your property. The silver arm ring on your wrist and the thrall at your side are the 2 halves of your reward. One is a symbol of wealth, the other is the human cost of that wealth. One evening, you see him sitting alone, trying to carve a small piece of wood with a borrowed knife. He is carving a small bird, its shape almost identical to the ones you've seen local men carve for their children. For a moment, the wall between your worlds seems to dissolve. You see not a thrall, but a man, homesick and heartsick, trying to recreate a small piece of the world he has lost. He looks up and sees you watching. Fear flashes in his eyes. He quickly hides the carving, higher and stronger than before. You turn away, a cold knot in your stomach. The silence of the thralls is the loudest sound on the farmstead, a constant, unspoken testament to the brutality that underpins your entire society. The nights grow longer and colder. The wind howls outside the longhouse, a mournful, hungry sound. This is the season of darkness, a time when the physical world shrinks and the world of the supernatural looms large. Huddled by the fire, with the wind rattling the wooden walls, the conversation inevitably turns to stories of gods, giants, and the inescapable web of fate. As a skald, a visiting poet, begins to chant an old story in the flickering firelight, you are pulled into the cosmology of your people. It is a universe starkly different from the one the captured monks believe in. There is no single, all-powerful, benevolent god. Your world is populated by a sprawling, dysfunctional family of gods, the Aesir and the Vanir, who are powerful but not all-knowing, and certainly not all good. They are flawed, jealous, and prone to making terrible mistakes. The chief of your gods is Odin, the All-Father, but he is not a comforting father figure. He is a wanderer, a seeker of forbidden knowledge, a master of runes and dark magic. He sacrificed one of his eyes in exchange for a drink from the well of wisdom. He hung himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 days and 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to win the secret of the runes. He is a grim, obsessive, and morally ambiguous god, who often values knowledge more than justice. Then there is Thor, the thunder god, the champion of mankind. He is more straightforward, a mighty warrior with his hammer, Mjolnir, who protects the world of humans from the constant threat of the giants. The Jotunheim, the giants, are not necessarily evil in the way a Christian devil is evil. They are forces of chaos, nature in its most raw and destructive form, the avalanche, the blizzard, the cracking of the ice. There's battles with them, or the eternal struggle of order against chaos, culture against untamed nature. This belief system is not codified in a single holy book. It's a fluid, messy collection of myths, poems, and folk traditions, passed down orally from one generation to the next. The versions of the stories can change from one valley to the next. Historians face a huge challenge in reconstructing this lost faith, as almost all of our sources, like the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda, were written down by Christian scholars in Iceland centuries after the Viking Age had ended and the old religion had been replaced. This leads to a constant and fascinating debate how much of what we know about Norse mythology is an authentic preservation of pagan belief, and how much has been filtered, reinterpreted, or even invented by the Christian authors who recorded it. Are we reading a true account of the old gods, or a Christian-inflected echo of them? One of the strangest and most enigmatic figures in the Norse pantheon is Loki. He is not truly a god, but the son of a giant who has become Odin's blood brother. He is a trickster, a shapeshifter, a being of pure cleverness and malice. He helps the gods as often as he harms them. He fathers monstrous children, the great wolf Fenrir, the world serpent Jormungandr, and Hel, the ruler of the underworld. Loki is the agent of change, the catalyst for disaster. It is he who engineers the death of Baldaldr, the most beloved of the gods, an act that sets in motion the chain of events leading to the end of the world. And this is perhaps the most defining feature of your faith, its profound pessimism. Your universe is not moving towards a final salvation. It is hurtling towards a final, inevitable doom, Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. At the end of time, the forces of chaos will break free. Fenrir will swallow the sun, Jormungandr will poison the sea, and the giants will storm the gates of Asgard. The gods and the great human heroes will fight a final, apocalyptic battle. Odin will be devoured by the wolf. Thor will kill the serpent, but will then die from its venom. It is a battle that the gods know they are destined to lose. And what about you? Where do you fit in your destiny? Your weird is not in your own hands. It is a thread, spun by the Norns, 3 mysterious female figures who live at the base of the world tree. They determine the length and course of every life, for gods and humans alike. You can face your fate with courage, but you cannot change it. This belief fosters a kind of fatalistic bravery. If the time and manner of your death are already decided, then there is no point in fearing it. All you can do is live the life you have been given with as much honor and courage as you can muster. The Skaldest's voice drops low as he reaches the end of the story. The fire has burned down to glowing embers. The wind outside has died down. A deep silence fills the longhouse. You look at the faces around you, illuminated by the dying light. They are grim, but not despairing. They are the faces of a people who believe they live in a doomed world, surrounded by chaos, ruled by flawed gods, and bound by an unchangeable fate. And yet, every morning, they get up, pick up their tools and their weapons, and face that world anyway. It is a worldview that offers no easy comfort, only a stark and demanding call to courage. The first real snow of winter falls, a thick, silent blanket that transforms the landscape into a world of whitened gray. The news arrives a few days later, carried by a traveler muffled in furs. The old chieftain from the next fjord, the father of the man who married Runa, has died. He was old and had been sick for some time, so the death was not unexpected, but his passing requires a proper ceremony, a Viking funeral, and your chieftain and his warriors are honor-bound to attend. You are part of the traveling party. You journey for a day through the snow-muffled forests until you reach the neighboring settlement. The mood is somber and formal. The body of the old chieftain has been laid out in his longhouse, dressed in his finest clothes, a tunic of red silk, trimmed with squirrel fur, a sign of his wealth and connections to the trade routes of the East. His best sword is laid by his side, his favorite drinking horn placed in his hand. For the next few days, a great funeral feast is held. It's a strange and solemn celebration. Ale flows freely, and great quantities of food are consumed. But the songs sung by the Skaldests are not tales of glorious battles, but sad elegies praising the dead chieftain's generosity, wisdom, and courage. It is a way for the community to grieve together, to reaffirm their bonds, and to honor the memory of their lost leader. The climax of the funeral rites is the burial itself, and here in the Viking world, there was no single, uniform practice. The funerary customs varied enormously by region, time period, and the status of the deceased. The two most famous types of Viking burial are the ones that have captured the modern imagination: the burial mound and the ship burial. The most common practice for a wealthy chieftain was to be interred in a large earthen mound. For Hallgar, he would be buried with his most valuable possessions, his weapons, his tools, his jewelry, and sometimes even his horse and dogs, sacrificed to accompany him into the afterlife. The belief was that the dead continued to live on in their mounds, guarding their treasure. These grave mounds became powerful symbols on the landscape, physical links to the ancestors and markers of a family's claim to the land. Then there is the ship burial, the most iconic and rarest of all. In this ritual, the deceased was placed within one of their actual ships, surrounded by a wealth of grave goods, and then the entire ship was buried under a massive mound of earth. The famous Osbergen geocased ad ship burials in Norway are breathtaking examples of this practice. These buried ships were not just tombs, they were vessels intended to carry the soul of the chieftain to the afterlife. But where was that afterlife? Odin's hall for slain warriors, or was it hell, the misty, gloomy underworld ruled by Loki's daughter? Or did they believe the soul simply resided in the mound itself? The truth is, we don't really know. Norse beliefs about the soul and the afterlife were complex and likely contradictory, with no single, clear doctrine. It's a question that continues to puzzle archaeologists and historians of religion. But what about the most famous image of all, the burning ship, set adrift on the sea? This spectacular scene, beloved by filmmakers, is the subject of intense historical debate. The only detailed description of such a ritual comes from the Arab traveler Ibn Fadl's account of the Rus chieftain's funeral on the Volga River. He describes the dead man being placed on a ship, which is pulled onto the shore, surrounded by sacrificed animals in the body of the female thrall, and then the entire thing is set ablaze by a naked man walking backwards. It's a dramatic and highly specific account, but it is the only account we have. There is currently no archaeological evidence from Scandinavia itself to support the practice of a burning ship being set out to sea. Most scholars now believe this was likely a specific custom of the Eastern Rus Vikings, and not a common practice in the Scandinavian homelands. The classic Viking funeral of popular culture may be more fiction than fact. For the old chieftain, the ceremony is a combination of these traditions. A large grave has been dug near the fjord. The chieftain's body is carried out and placed inside a small boat, offering not his great longship. The boat is filled with his possessions, his sword, his shield, a cauldron, some food, and a chest of silver. His favorite hunting dog and 2 of his horses are then killed, their bodies placed carefully in the boat alongside him. The animals are not just being killed, they are being sent with their master to serve him in the next world. The boat is not set on fire. Instead, it is covered with a wooden roof, creating a small death house within the grave. Then, you and all the other men begin the long, laborious task of building the mound. You work for hours, hauling earth and stones, piling them higher and higher over the grave until a new, small hill stands on the shoreline, a permanent marker of the man buried beneath. As you place the last stone on the mound, you look out at the grey fjord. The funeral is over. The old chieftain has been sent on his final journey. His life is finished, his story told. The mound he now inhabits will stand for centuries, a silent testament to his life and his people's beliefs about death. It is a solemn, powerful, and deeply respectful end. But as you turn to leave, you can't help but think of Sten, your shipmate, whose only tomb was the cold, unmarked sea. In your world, even in death, not all men are created equal. You return to your own settlement just as the heart of winter takes hold. The world is now a place of deep, cold, and profound silence. The sun is a fleeting visitor, appearing for only a few hours each day as a week, low-hanging ore before surrendering the sky to an endless twilight. The fjord is frozen near the shore, the longship pulled far up onto the beach, a hibernating beast under a thick blanket of snow. This is the time of year that truly tests your resilience. A season-long battle against the Viking Age's most relentless and unforgiving enemy, the Scandinavian winter. The longhouse, which felt crowded and stuffy in the summer, now feels like a sanctuary of life and warmth. The central fire is never allowed to go out. It is the beating heart of your home, the single source of heat and light in a world gone dark and cold. The family is forced together in this confined space for months on end. The air is perpetually thick with smoke, the smell of damp wool, and the close, intimate scent of too many people living in one room. The days are shortened, the nights are long, so very long. To pass the endless hours of darkness, you rely on the simple pleasures of community and craft. The women bring their weaving looms closer to the fire, their fingers deftly working the threads in the flickering light. The men sit on benches, carving wood, mending tools, or sharpening their weapons. This is a time for maintenance, for preparing for the distant spring. It is also a time for stories. The long winter nights are the natural incubator for the great sagas and myths of your people. The skald who recited the tale of the gods is long gone, but others take his place. An old man tells a ghost story about a Dryvagastar that haunts a nearby burial mound, his voice dropping to a whisper, making everyone huddle a little closer to the fire. A veteran warrior recounts a tale from a raid years ago, embellishing the details, making himself the hero of a story that grows more glorious with each telling. You listen, but you do not share your own story. The memories are still too raw. You play games to pass the time. You have dice, carved from bone or antler, and you gamble for small trinkets or favors. The most popular game is HNEFATAFL or King's Table. It's a strategic board game, played on a wooden board with a grid, where a central king piece must try to escape to one of the corners, while a larger force of attacker pieces tries to surround and capture him. It's a game of strategy and sacrifice, a miniature representation of a chieftain surrounded by his guard, trying to break out of a hopeless situation. Archaeologists find pieces for a Chen Ifat AFL in graves all over the Viking world, a testament to its popularity. But underneath the stories and the games, a constant, nagging anxiety pervades the winter longhouse, the fear of starvation. Your entire year's labor has been directed towards this moment, to ensuring you have enough food to survive until the spring thaw. You look at the dwindling supplies of salted fish, smoked meat, and dried grain stored in the chieftain's locked chests. The matriarch rations it out with meticulous care, her face a mask of grim concentration. Every meal is a reminder of how precarious your existence is. A winter that lasts a few weeks to long can be a death sentence for the entire community. One of the great historical questions about this period is the Little Ice Age and its impact on the Vikings. Some climate data suggests that a period of significant cooling began in the late Viking Age, making Scandinavian winters harsher and growing seasons shorter. Could this climate change have been a contributing factor to the end of the Viking Age itself? Did it make the agricultural lifestyle in the homelands even more difficult, and were the settlements in places like Greenland ultimately doomed by a climate that became too cold to support them? It's a complex theory that connects meteorology, archaeology, and history, suggesting that the ultimate defeat of the Vikings came not from an enemy army, but from a slow, inexorable shift in the global climate. A particularly grim and seldom mentioned aspect of a desperate winter was the accepted practice of killing the useless mouse. In a time of severe famine, a family might be forced to make a terrible choice. The very old, who could no longer work, or a newborn infant, particularly a girl, might be exposed, left outside in the snow to die. This was not seen as murder, but as a tragic necessity, a sacrifice made to ensure the survival of the rest of the family. It is the darkest secret of the winter longhouse, a last resort in the face of absolute desperation. As the weeks drag on, the confinement begins to fray everyone's nerves. The same stories, the same smoky air, day after day. Small annoyances fester into bitter resentments. The longhouse becomes a pressure cooker of simmering tensions. A dispute over a game of dice, an argument over a borrowed tool. These small conflicts can easily escalate into violence when there is no escape. You sit by the fire, carving a piece of wood, the memories of your journey swirling in your head. You survived the raid. You have survived, so far, the winter. You have looked into the heart of your world and seen its brutal, unglamorous truth. It is a world of constant labor, of casual violence, of deep-seated fears and profound, stoic courage. As the first, faint signs of spring begin to appear, a little more light in the sky each day, the sound of dripping water from the roof. You have made it. You have made it. You have survived a year in the Viking Age. But as you look at the faces around you, you know that the cycle is just beginning again. The fields will need to be plowed, the ships will need to be prepared, and the hunger for land, for wealth, and for honor will soon doctor men back out onto the sea. The struggle is endless, and so your journey through this single, long year in the Viking Age comes to a close. You have woken in the smoky longhouse, tasted the blandness of survival, and felt the unyielding demands of labor. You've witnessed the cold calculus of honor and the bloody finality of the duel. You've sailed on the terrifying, open sea, a tiny, fragile speck of life in an immense, indifferent world. You felt the rush of a chaotic raid, and the heavy, silent weight of its consequences. You have stood on a foreign shore as an invader, and you have felt the profound unease of becoming a master to a man who was once your equal. You've listened to the stories of doomed gods and tangled fates, and you have faced the long, dark, hungry night of a northern winter. You have survived, But the wind still carries the scent of salt and iron, and the sea still whispers its promises of danger and reward. The world is quiet now, just for a moment, resting under a blanket of snow. The struggles of that distant past can fade, replaced by the quiet comfort of your own bed. The smoke of the longhouse fire can clear, leaving only the soft darkness of your room. The end of the article. Good night.